Roll call, please.
Dickman here.
Johnston here.
Grillo here.
Clark here.
Gavich here.
Corral here.
Seifert here.
I trust you all have looked over the minutes. If there are no corrections or comments, motion?
Dickman makes a motion that we approve the minutes of the July 25th, 2017 meeting.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston abstains.
Grillo, aye.
Clark, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Significant common council actions. Carrie?
Common Council approved the following: an ordinance approving the amendment to the conditional use permit for the properties at 9,000 and 9,100 South Nicholson Road for the operation of private outdoor recreation facilities, a resolution approving a certified survey map for Boylan Properties Oak Creek LLC for the properties at 7,008 and 7018 South 27th Street and 2,500 West Rawson Avenue, and a resolution approving a certified survey map for St. Matthews Parish for the properties at 9261, 9303, 9329, and 9348R South Chicago Road. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Our first item, 5A, public hearing on the comprehensive plan amendment. I'd like to take that one first. Is that going with Carrie?
I'll read the official notice into the record. Notice of public hearing before the Oak Creek Plan Commission. The purpose of this public hearing is to consider an amendment to the 2020 Vision, a comprehensive plan for the city of Oak Creek as it relates to the properties at 7581, 7705, 7725, 7751, 7765, and 7781, 7811, 7831, and 7869 South 13th Street. The hearing date is Tuesday, August 8th, 2017 at 6 p.m. in the Oak Creek City Hall, 8040 South 6th Street, Oak Creek, Wisconsin 53154 in the Common Council Chambers. The proposal is a proposed amendment to update the planned land use category and map 2 in the comprehensive plan from single-family residential to planned mixed use. No change to the resource protection area for the properties at 7581, 7705, 7725, 7751, 7765, 7781, 7811, 7831, and 7869 South 13th Street. The Plan Commission may schedule other public meeting items or public hearings for August 8th. This hearing may begin at 6 p.m. or as soon as possible following the conclusion of any other public meeting items or public hearings. Any persons with questions regarding the proposed changes may call the Department of Community Development at 414-766-7027 during regular business hours. The date of notice is June 27, 2017. City of Oak Creek Plan Commission, Daniel J. Bukevich, Mayor. This is a public hearing. Anyone who wishes to discuss this item should approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and address your comments to the Plan Commission.
Thank you, Carrie. As Carrie stated, this is a public hearing. I will make 3 calls. First call. I do have 2 to read in, so if you'd like to approach Linda and Dan Aschlager. Sorry about butchering that on you. Name and address, please, for the record.
Linda Olschlager, 7764 South 13th Street. So the address of my house is not in here, but we are directly across the street, so what happens there will affect us.
Understood.
This mixed use, I'm not clear, I understand mixed use somewhat, but what specifically do you have in mind?
Well, specifically, mixed use is a general category that encapsulates a lot of different uses. I will turn it over to one of our city planners, Carrie. Could you give the definition of mixed use, please?
Sure. Maybe it would be a little bit helpful to explain that this isn't a rezoning, this is a change to the comprehensive plan. So the properties themselves would still have to go through a zoning change in the future if they were to change what is already there. What mixed use would encompass would be such things as commercial, it could incorporate residential, it could incorporate office. Those kinds of things would be allowed in a mixed use category for the comprehensive plan. But again, they would have to go through a rezone, and that would detail the specific allowed uses within that district.
Thank you, Carrie.
Okay, that's helpful. Just for the record, I would like to state that we would be against anything that involves big, tall lights that are going to shine in our windows, probably 20 hours a day or whatever. Anything that would lower our property values, which I think may already happen since we've gotten a couple notices that our property taxes have dropped, which usually is an indicator that the value of the property has dropped. We've lived there 50 years, have put a ton of money and work into it. We keep the property immaculate so that it's a credit to us and the city of Oak Creek. From what I've seen of some of the development so far, that's not always the case. We get all these promises about landscaping and this and that, and maintenance of the property. The plants are put in, they look nice the first year, and by the next year, they're a weed patch. We just don't want anything that's going to devalue our property any further.
Understood, and it's not our goal to do that. And as Carrie said, anything that would come, this is just part of the plan, it'd have to come in for a rezone, and everything would come through Planning Commission.
I understand
So
that.
we
but there
try to
would
be as
a-
transparent as possible. Linda, you have "we would like to speak." Is Dan present? Does he want to
He's
speak?
here. I don't know if he has anything to add to what I've said.
Dan Oschlager, 7764 South 13th. I've been a resident of Oak Creek for 81 years, and I lived in this house here since 1961, 67. And, of course, I've seen a lot of changes, too, you know. And my first question is this Costco going to go across the street?
No, we have no confirmation of a Costco
Okay,
at this present
okay.
time, or have I contacted
Okay.
Costco.
Because I can't understand all these large grocery stores and things coming into our city. We have enough now. And you know, if you read the paper and the business page, they're going to be defunct. Look at what's happened to Southridge. It's going to be, Southridge. They're all going to 84th Street and little storefronts. It's just whole changing. And what something else going to say about when you get older, you get a lax of memory, you know.
Take your time.
Okay. Anyways, I guess I lost that point of view. Okay. Because I had heard if Costco goes in, there would be a parking lot between Costco and any other stores across the parking lot, and that means anything. We could have another naughty but nice back there, and then you can't stop it, and we don't want that, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
There's actually zoning laws for those
Yeah, I
types of
understand it, okay.
establishments. But
And they keep building these smaller stores. Go down Rawson Avenue, College Avenue. There's so many stores built by developers, which I can understand, they make money, but they're empty. And I talked to a lawyer. He says they can take the tax deduction for 10 years on each one, and they can reapply again, and they'll still stay empty. That boggles my mind, you know.
well, it's not absolutely true
I know,
on
but
that case.
but it could happen. Yeah.
Again, it's really just a plan.
Yeah.
And think of it as use of the land in the future, but we have no idea who may approach us or what may approach us to come there.
As I said, I lived there all this time, and our past alderperson, Betty Copeland, bless her soul, she was a heck of a good alderperson. And I thought our South 13th Street was grandfathered to stay totally residential. And of course, businesses are coming from the north, coming right down south now.
I can't answer that
Yeah,
question for you.
Yeah, I thought it was grandfathered, you know. So
Again,
okay.
officially, I have no idea
I'm
what
just
you
curious.
were ever told. But
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Next, Candy Carlson, 7828 South 13th Street. Welcome. Name and address, please.
Candy Carlson, 7828 South 13th Street. I also live across the street from the property. I'm neighbors to Dan and Linda. And what brought this up?
This, the people that own the land, that land was in receivership.
Okay.
So they're probably looking to get it on the open market, and they probably have more options. It's currently zoned, if I'm not mistaken, A1. I think that's,
So the
Is that
land
ag one or
behind
is that
there,
res?
is that agricultural?
well, the entire plot, it may be mixed. What is it, Carrie?
Right now, the properties are zoned B3 Office and Professional Business, and some of them are zoned RS3, which is Single Family Residential. Now, a little bit of background. In December of 2006, The city actually initiated discussion of amending the comprehensive plan for the two larger parcels in this area as part of a rezone request. The rezone actually proceeded, but unfortunately, the comprehensive plan process was never completed. This is part of the reason why we're here. Also, the potential future development of these parcels would be in a PUD. We don't have plans at this point, but that's why we're proposing mixed use here.
Did that make sense? So it's zone B4 business, so it can be retail business. With the mixed use plan, they come in with a planned unit development. Oh, is it B3?
E3, so it's office and professional business right now, and the smaller parcels are zoned residential right now.
Okay, so thank you for that. And they're looking to go to a mixed use, which, as their definition said, it could be residential, commercial, retail, stuff like that.
So the owners of the property have requested this.
The overall, the marketing for that land.
Okay. Then I just want to state that we're opposed to it, because if it needs to be rezoned and they actually have a plan in action, why can't they wait till then?
There's no plan in action. Carrie?
This is actually the first step in order for them to be able to proceed with asking for a rezone and proceed with any proposal for development on the property. Without this change, they can't propose a mixed-use development or a planned unit development. So that's why this procedure is taking place. And again, it's also cleaning up something that the city initiated back in 2006 for two of the larger parcels.
Okay, then I just want to state for the record that we're opposed to it, because we can see the writing on the wall with Sam's Club going there and stuff. We've got the widening of the road. We've got sidewalks going in that we don't want. We came out here to live in the suburbs. We were very happy with the property, and it's just, they're taking it for the road. You're gonna end up putting big stuff across the street from us. We didn't want to live in the city, or we would have stayed in the city.
Understood.
So, just to state, we're opposed.
Thank you. I'll now make the second call. Third, come on up, sir. Name and address for the record,
Dennis
please.
Cieslak, 7781 South 13th Street. I'm for it. I've been offered my land to be pre-sold. With the widening of the road and the building behind it, I just want to get out. We're already eating dust from IKEA. I want to move on with my life. I said, so I'd like to get what has to be settled so that it can go on. Right now, we're at a stalemate. I says, until you get the comprehensive plan fixed up, they can't do anything, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'd like to get that done, then maybe I can decide what I want to do.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Third and final call. Okay, I will close the public hearing, and we will move on to item 5B. Oh, whoop, I'm sorry. 6A, we will take care of the comprehensive plan right away. So I'll open it up for comments and questions from the commission. Pat?
I think everything was answered in Carrie's explanation. We have to do something with the property. This will at least bring the options forward, correct?
Yes.
Then we can decide, and then we get a bite at the apple.
And then whatever comes forward, comes forward. Wally?
As Kerry mentioned, this was something I think should have been done before this, because we were talking in 2006, is that correct? About doing something. All we're doing is cleaning up the procedure, and so that we can start looking forward to, what's going to be going in there. And we do have control over it.
That is true. Now, the procedure that was started in 2006 was limited to the two larger parcels. However, based on the development plans, which would include a PUD for mixed use potentially, incorporating those other parcels that are currently zoned residential into the mix would allow for a more comprehensive development plan potentially. That's why it was expanded to include those properties, and as you heard from the neighbor, those properties are currently being assembled. So it's adding to the process that was started in 2006.
If I understood that right, so then by adding those parcels, Carrie, then instead of them being left with whatever comes behind them, they're able to make some decisions based to go along with that process?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Greg?
I'm just curious, understanding that this isn't actually the
zoning of it. It's just the updating the comprehensive plan. If in the future it is rezoned as some type of mixed uses, can those, I mean, those homes could stay there technically?
What we would need is, we would have to have a proposal from the developer of the property to request a specific zone for those properties to be zoned into. If they wanted to go with a planned unit development and some of those houses were to remain, they would have to incorporate those houses into how they would develop the rest of the property. In other words, they would have to have that in their considerations. We have not necessarily heard that, but we also haven't received a specific plan at this point. So any rezone or development plan would be coming before the Plan Commission, and neighbors would have an opportunity to both review and comment on those plans.
So in other words, then those neighbors, I mean, they've got to reach a deal with those neighbors. I mean, they can't move them out of their house.
That's that's
Right.
between the developer and the landowners.
Correct.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think that puts a landowner in a position of some leverage to negotiate that, correct? I mean, I'd rather have that option when we look at it.
Anybody else?
I
Fred?
just agree with what's happening. I think we need to make that change. And if we don't, we're going to have some problems down the road.
All right. No more questions or comment? Motion?
Correll moves the Plan Commission adopts Resolution 2017-06, amending the comprehensive plan and planned land use map to reflect the change in land use from single-family residential to planned mixed use. No change to the resource protection area for the properties at 7581, 7705, 7725, 7751, 7765, 7781, 7611, 7831, and 7869 South 13th Street, following a public hearing and adoption by the Common Council.
Just one
Different section,
clarification, it's not 7611, it's 7811.
7811. Concur.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnson, aye.
Mark, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Corell, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Thank you. I'd like to move back to item 5B. It is a public hearing for a proposed sign appeal for a building at 8750 South Howell, submitted by Jones Signs, Inc. on behalf of T-Mobile. I would allow for one 58.4 square foot wall sign on the west elevation and one 37.3 square foot wall sign on the east elevation of a multi-tenant building at 8750 South Howell. Pete?
Yes, thank you. I'll read the public hearing notice into the record. City of Oak Creek notice of public hearing before the Plan Commission. A public hearing for a sign appeal will be held Tuesday, August 8th, 2017 at 6 p.m. Oak Creek City Hall, Common Council Chambers, 8040 South 6th Street, Oak Creek, Wisconsin, 53154. The appellant is T-Mobile, mobile represented by Jones Sign Company, tax key number 860-9996000. Property is located at 8750 South Howell Avenue. The applicant is requesting a variance from section 17.0706J2, which states that one wall sign identifying the name of the development or the principal tenant shall be permitted. The area of the wall signs within a planned sign program shall equal 1 square foot of signage per lineal frontage of tenant space to a maximum of 100 square feet. If granted, the variance would allow the applicant to install a total of 2 wall signs for the tenant space. One 3-foot, 6-inch and quarter-inch by 16-foot, 7-inch or 7 1/4 inch wall sign will be located on the west elevation of the building, and one 2-foot, 9-inch, 3/4 inch by 12-foot, 3.5-inch wall sign on the east elevation of the building for the tenant space located at 8750 South Howell Avenue. Zoning of the property is B4CU, Highway Business District, conditional use. All interested persons wishing to be heard are invited to be present. Dated this 20th day of July, 2017. Plan Commission, City of Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Signed Mayor Daniel J. Bukowitz, Chairman. This is a public hearing, and anyone who wishes to make a comment regarding this issue should step up to the podium, state your name and address, and proceed to address the commission with your comments. This public hearing is now open.
Thank you, Pete. As Pete stated, I will make 3 calls. First call. Welcome. Name and address, please.
Sarah Peters, I'm with Jones Sign Company, representing T-Mobile at 8750 South Howell Avenue. We applied for a sign appeal for our client. They're looking for 2 wall signs, one at 37.3 square feet and the other at 58.4 square feet. This request is for better visibility of the property. Dunkin' Donuts and Qdoba, who are also tenants in this multi-tenant building. They each have 2 wall signs. We understand that they're end units, but the location of the building, due to the high traffic volume, looking for better visibility. The code would allow them one wall sign directed towards South Howell Avenue, but the main public entrance is located on the opposite side in the parking lot. It's the main public entrance. They're looking for visibility there. I'm not from the area. I did take a drive by the property. If I didn't have it in my GPS, I probably would have missed it. There's a monument sign there, that's in the right up here, but the monument sign is very hard to see, poor visibility. There's trees, just the way it's located on the property, that is hard to see. And T-Mobile they would have a tenant panel, but it would be the very bottom tenant panel. So I feel like that would be very hard to see that. So hence the larger wall signs for better visibility. Keeping with, other tenants that do have the 2 wall signs on the property. Also, we understand that, due to code, end units are allowed 2 wall signs, so that really limits, tenants that are interior to multi-tenant buildings here. The square footage is, better visibility. It's based on their tenant frontage. Well, they have a very small tenant frontage. They get 1 square foot per linear foot of frontage. Their tenant space is 17 square feet or 17 feet, so they could get a 17 square foot sign. Just looking for larger signs for, again, better visibility to the high traffic volume that's there at the corner there.
Okay. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. That was the first call, wasn't it?
First
Was it?
call.
Oh,
That was first call.
yeah. Okay. That was it then, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yep. Second call? Third and final call. Okay, we will close the public hearing and move on to item 6B, sign appeal. Pete?
Yep, I will take over here. As indicated, I do have up on the screen the 1 wall sign that they have proposed. I just want to be able to describe how the signs are. This is going to have a channel letter design, which is typical, what you see in a city. However, what's different with T-Mobile proposed sign is that it's going to be internally lit LED channel letters, which we see everywhere, but also it's going to be halo lit, so it's going to be backlit, similar to some of, trying to think of a good example, I think Pizza Man is backlit, but it's going to shine onto that pink backer plate. So why I bring that up is that in the code, when you have multi-tenant buildings, the idea is to have signs that are similar in design, size, so that way it looks like you have some sort of theme or some kind of cohesiveness with the sign program. This particular one doesn't have that. It has this extra feature. It has the pink backer plate, which separates it from Qdoba, Dunkin' Donuts, and Verizon. So just wanted to make that point that as part of sign plans, we like to see that. This is one that happened prior to sign plans being required. So that is what's going on there. The 2 signs are similar in design, though. Both sides are. Difference is only the size. One of the other things to point out that we do have the limit for the linear foot. One would limit this sign to be 17.5 feet. To give you a comparison, if you recall the old Mattress Firm site, right now there's Papa John's, and there's a Cricket, because that used to be a 2-tenant building. Now it's more than 2-tenant. Cricket was limited to the smaller size sign. So just to give you a kind of a scope of what this sign looks on the screen here and what the Cricket sign looks like on the wall over at it's the Papa Murphy Cricket tenant building. So with that said, I mean, there's nothing else that's different. However, as always, when considering a variance, you take into consideration, the criteria that I always include in all of my sign appeal reports, talking about no public harm, shall include enhancement to the overall character of the neighborhood. The sign should not result in undue concentration of signage. The effect proposed should not depreciate the value of the area. And also that, as always, you do control size, height, number. Also, would like to give you a little bit of history on this particular tenant space. Dunkin' Donuts tried to get one on the east elevation, sign appeal, denied. Verizon tried to get a sign appeal, denied. Easy payday loan, applied, denied. Only one that got, they got two signs is Qdoba and Dunkin' Donuts, but Dunkin' Donuts wanted that third on the east elevation. If memory serves me correctly, it faces the interior parking lot of Pick and Save. The signage that is facing interior, for additional visibility, is it really needed? Typically, those tenants use the glazing for additional signage, which they are permitted up to 25% of the glazing to identify where their entrance is. So having said that, if the Plan Commission believes a variance should be granted, the Plan Commission can make a motion to grant the variance allowing the installation of one 57.8 square foot wall sign on the west elevation and one 37.8 square foot wall sign on the east elevation of the tenant space located at 8750 South Howell Avenue.
Thank you very much, Pete. Open it up for questions from the commission. Fred?
Yeah, Pete, can you give us a view of the whole area of the other buildings where the signs that they have on them, like Dunkin' Donut
There's
and
the
so forth,
monument.
on the building, not the ground sign?
Justin Pete's skills tonight.
Sorry about that.
That's looking west, correct?
This is the west elevation. Yes, this is facing Howell Avenue. Google Maps wouldn't let me zoom in because that's not a public road, so.
So there, the space to the left of Verizon, is that what we're saying?
Yeah, it was where the old Easy Payday loan
Gotcha.
was. So
Gotcha.
this would be right where the square is, where it'd be approximate where the location is, where they want to put the sign. And I'm going to flip back to the graphic just to give you how much they're going to propose to fill.
Verizon?
Yeah, Verizon's still there. Two phone stores are
They
next.
can see how much of that space is going to be consumed by a lot of it. Now, I did look at other T-Mobile locations in the city, and they don't necessarily have that pink backer. They'll just have the channel letters. So that's something, but then again, that's
So
design. No, that's
We'd have
part-
that option though in the variance not to go with that style if we were to grant two sizes but didn't allow that if we wanted it to fit more with the rest of the building. Is that something we could do, Pete?
Yeah, it's something to ask the applicant if they're
I
willing
mean,
to go
if we
there.
get to that point and see what their thought process is.
Yes.
Consistency'd be
Yeah.
nice.
I mean, I could see that, we've given those side or end tenants two signs everywhere. They can do that. But just about every other strip mall that's got something behind it on Rawson, we just went in the front and the back. And that's got no sign package. Nothing matches. Looks terrible, Rawson and Howell. Don't really care for that one. So I guess I'm not as opposed to the two signs as stated as much as the size and the difference in the style of sign. So if it looked more like the ones on the end cap and was of a size proportionally, Pete, because I think I'm reading they're way too large for the size square footage, linear square footage they have of frontage.
Correct. It is a narrow tenant space. And so, to limit the size,
So like the Verizon sign next to them, Pete, how
that is 42.
and how much square feet do they have linear? I mean, how much tenant space do
They have about the same. So I don't know how exactly
How-
Verizon was able to do that.
Do
I
that.
know that Dunkin' Donuts and Qdoba did get variances for size.
So if that one's
number.
42, they're looking for 58 and 37. If we got, just for the commission, if we had a closer size to Verizon, a similar style, the two sides doesn't bother me as much because I think you do enter it from the back. If you're not familiar with it, I get it. And the other thing is we've had how many tenants that we just discussed went through there? Maybe we want to keep somebody. Maybe it helps.
Well, this tenant space hasn't been filled since Easy Payday was the first tenant. one of the
there.
original, and they just
It's
haven't
a tough
refilled
spot.
it.
It's a tough spot. I mean, when I looked at with that monument sign, just kind of clouds up everything when I couldn't really identify. And
It's
I
a
live
busy
here.
intersection.
Yeah, it's tough. So, my thought process would be size it down a little bit and keep it a similar style sign. Then I'd be okay with it too.
I
Brad?
agree with Pat. The size is what kind of gets me, and it doesn't kind of blend in with the rest of the signs in the area.
Jossie, anything?
And I may have missed this, is the actual size of the sign compliant? to our code
The size,
today?
no, because the size could not exceed 17 and a half square feet, because it's only 17.7 inches in width. It's 1 foot, 1 square foot per linear frontage. So that's what they're asking for a variance to go larger. They're also asking for the additional number, because right now they're only allowed to have on one side.
Commissioner Chandler, that's why I thought that though T-Mobile is above that as well. So I think we should at least be fair to the competition. I don't have either phone system, by the way.
Wally?
Yeah, Pete, if you were mentioning that with the red background or the backing to the T-Mobile, if they were to take that away, would that still would knock down the square footage, is that correct? Because we go by the square around it, no matter what?
Well, it would go from the top of the T to the bottom of the T to the square on the right. So, I mean, it would shrink the sign a little bit if you took out the pink backer, because that's considered part of the backer. I mean, if you look at the way the other signs are mounted, they're mounted on a raceway. So it's usually a narrow bar that's attached that matches the back of the building. That's what the other ones have. This one is basically using their mounting system as a display. So we, in the calculations, are including the whole pink backer, which is the mounting system for this particular sign.
I think if I recall the red backing, though, when you see T-Mobile, that's their standard, I believe, isn't it?
Oh,
when they advertise?
that's their, I think, one of their brand colors,
That's their
yes.
recommended brand, if you want to say it.
In essence, says their T-Mobile letters can be internally lit with pink lights.
So from a size, it sounds, when I saw your drawing, it looked like it would be pretty compatible to the Verizon sign. Is that correct? Fairly close?
Well, if you look at, I'm just trying to see, in the right-hand side of it, they show a chart here that shows what was being proposed, which is the 58.4. And if you look at the letter height with letter width, you know, it could shrink down. There's the next size down. It looks like they have, you know, according to what they submitted, it looks like they have different standards. They have a 20.9 to as large as a 149.5 for this particular design. Now, the 47.3 could be closer to that 42, you know, similar to Verizon. You know, if applicant would have to be the one that determines if, you know, the smaller size is adequate or not. But you have the ultimate decision of what the correct size is, because we know 17 and a half is not enough by the applicant standards. Is 57 or 58.4, you know, acceptable?
One of the problems that we have when we have the person from the sign company coming here, they can't really make decisions for the owners of the place. Generally, you know, if we want some major change. That's why I like to see the owner be here at the same time as the sign person.
Can they give us some direction of what they think of our comments, or which way they'd maybe think, if you've done other T-Mobiles, they'd be leaning?
Sarah? Can you come back up, please?
Actually, our client, they are willing to drop the sizes of their signs. I mean, they're looking, the two wall signs would be great. So if, you know, you're willing to work with them, they would reduce
Okay.
square footage. The backer panel is their new branding that they're doing, so that is why they're looking to get that, you know, it's their new standard sign package, so they're looking for the backer. Would be the main thing too. But
Gotcha.
they would definitely, you know, consider reducing the square footages. I think the smallest on there would be the 20. And they'd even do one that was like 17 square feet, you know, to
So they'd keep the look, that new brand look is more important than the size to them. And I guess from my feedback, if it's considerably smaller, it might be,
Yeah.
I do see this look That other T-Mobile's is red and white, but it just doesn't match.
But they're concerned having two of them. That's more concerning
part.
than anything else.
For,
Okay.
you know, better
Well,
visibility
I think
for
we can
both
work out
sides.
something.
Dawn?
I believe that backer is not going to match the rest of them. It might be the new branding, but we also have to look at the area on that corner. If it's really lit, I mean, that will look like a lit box. I also think it's way too big. So keeping it within the 42 as we have in the past and putting, you know, whether they be pink letters or white letters, using, you know, to match the rest of the building. On the front, are they going to be the only one with a sign on the front?
On the east elevation?
Yeah.
Qdoba has a one hanging over their entryway, which is the northeast corner. They went on the corners of it. Now, like Dunkin' Donuts is on the west and south elevation, but they don't have anything. So Qdoba would be the only tenant that has a quasi sign. It's not completely on the east, but that's where they chose to put their second sign.
Right, and you would think to save money, they could use it on the glazing, correct?
Glazing would be an
The
option.
logo
I
would
mean,
be on
unlike
glazing.
Drexel Town Square, they have a little bit more leniency when it comes to advertising on glass. You can go up to 25% of the glazing. Can bring up their entrance. So here's their front door. This is their area. These three panels. So they would have opportunities there to do some advertising. I know Verizon has done that. Dunkin' Donuts, I believe, has some vinyl clings that are on the glazing on that side. So there are other options for the applicant to show where their entrance is. I mean, if you're going to get into that location, if you made the effort to find it from Howell Avenue, that's, I think, was where this, the signage needs to be on the inside. When you're inside the parking lot, there's 4 doors. Could mistake and go to Verizon, I suppose. But
Yeah.
Anybody else? Brian, anything?
I just think that the wall sign itself is too large, and the red backer, it doesn't fit on that building.
And they use that more of a, what do you call it, the raceway on the bottom with channel letters and incorporate that red into the raceway?
well, the raceway
I mean, they've got to put the channel letters on something, correct?
all have some sort of channel lettering. I'm just going to bring it up so you can. When you look at the channel letters, you don't see, it's usually like a straight line connecting all the letters. I'm not sure making that a bright pink would do anything to help the situation. I think it would just look even more out of place than the pink backer.
If our client would be willing to do just channel letters, would the commission allow for them to have 2 wall signs?
I think they will see how the vote goes up. I mean, in the back from Pick and Save, another sign back there. I mean, I see 2 when I come in on the sides. I don't have any heartburn over the second side as long as the sign in the front is appropriate size. So I think you got a better chance with 2 signs, much smaller, no pink, that matches up the other signs. As size-wise, maybe just for discussion, are we looking at, Pete, help me out, what is proposed is the 20, what's in
The
red
highlighted,
on our sheets? 24.
37. I have it in my report here. 58.3 square foot sign on the west elevation and a 37.3 square foot on the east elevation. So this is the east elevation sign. It's tough to tell the difference because they're essentially the same size. They're the same sign, but just different sizes. So this is the 37.3 on the entrance. And then the other one, this is the larger one.
The larger one's what they show on the front on the plans.
Yes. So this will be the west elevation, non-entry side, which is the larger, that's that 58.3. And then they have the different sizes where they can go a little bit smaller, going down to 20.9.
Wouldn't we want similar sizes on both elevations,
Yeah,
right? 27 on both?
how much was that, Pat?
It'll be 37.
Or, I'm sorry, 37 on
37,
both?
that's what I thought,
Yeah,
okay.
30, the same, both without the backlit pink?
Craig?
I would just kind of second be opposed to a second sign, I think, on the other side of the building, being that no other business really has a true sign there. It would kind of, from the pick and save side of that building, it would look like the whole building is Qdoba and T-Mobile, basically, with a bright pink sign versus the other ones that weren't allowed to put signs up. So we're not going to go with pink. We're not going to. The ones have door signs, don't they? Window signs
The east side.
on the east side.
Yeah. So. Got something else, Wally?
Yeah, Pete, I don't know if you know it, but, Verizon's only got the sign on one side, correct, the west side? Do you know if they had originally applied for one on the east side?
Yes, I believe they did.
And we turned them down?
Yeah. And now, as all sign appeals are all based on, they should be as much on, the current situation, not necessarily in past history, but I do want to always bring that up, that there was a history of people applying for it for the middle tenant spaces.
So we must have some reason also for denying it.
I believe when there was the original development, the idea was to keep signage along Howell Avenue and not necessarily interior to the parking lot.
I was here during that deal, and we've had these two-sided buildings, not only here, but along Howell Avenue, and we've kind of struggled with it both ways. So we kind of went to limit signage on the inside facing Pick and Save. I can't even tell you how I voted on the thing the last time through. I'm not opposed to it on the inside, as long as the size is appropriate. The important side, I feel, is the west side on Howell. I hate to shake anybody's corporate branding, but it would be nice if we kept it all channel letters to match. I understand, there's certain markets and things, but if we could keep it that way, it would be appreciated. But I too, as long as we're appropriate on the size, which I think was established at 37, I'm okay on both sides. So, anybody else, or somebody want to attempt a motion?
Let's
on
take a
this?
run at it. Let's take a run at it and let the
Oh, go
votes
ahead,
fall.
Pat. You love it.
If I could, to help you out there,
Yeah.
I would recommend stating that approving that there would be a 37.8 channel letter sign attached with the raceway that matches the color of the building for both the east and west elevations for the tenant space at 8750 South Tenant Howell Avenue. Just so that way it's clear that that pink backer plate is not part of the deal. The deals will give you in two signs, right? Is that, if I'm understanding, you'll get east and west.
That's what
At
I'm
37.8.
proposing, right?
Yeah, okay. But I just wanted to mention that raceway with color matching the building, that would be in line with what exists with the other tenant spaces.
Which sounds good, Pat.
Yeah, is that enough, or do you want me to restate that?
However, the secretary wants to try to transcribe that motion.
I guess the motion wants to say that we would approve the two signs, both at 37.8 square foot size, channel letters only with raceway to match the existing building signs. That works?
Works for me.
Okay,
I
Dick will
understand.
second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnson, aye.
Carlo, I.
Clark, no.
Gavich, aye.
Correll, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, no.
Gary, Sarah. There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Item 6C is a rezone request by Daniel Zeismer to rezone the property at 9838 South Chicago Road from RS3 Single Family Residential and A1 Limited Agricultural to A1 Limited Agricultural. Carrie?
And commissioners will recall that this was previously on the previous meeting agenda, but it had to be rescheduled due to a notice error. So we are back here tonight to review the proposed rezone request for the properties. The land is currently split zoned, but a minimum acreage requirement of 5 acres is required for the A1 district, which is what the request is for. On the screen right now is a plat of survey showing the proposed dwelling and outbuilding. Those buildings are not for Plan Commission review tonight. This is just giving you an idea of what the proposal is for the future use of the property. which would be a new single-family dwelling with an accessory agricultural building, and utilizing the property for agricultural purposes. So rezoning it all to A1. Again, the minimum acreage is 5. They have just over 5 acres. Surrounding properties in the area are zoned residential, agricultural, and commercial. The comprehensive plan is calling this area out as planned mixed use, which allows for multiple zoning designations. So if the Plan Commission feels that the proposed rezone to A1 agricultural is appropriate, the suggested motion is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the property at 9838 South Chicago Road be rezoned from RS3 single-family residential and A1 limited agricultural to A1 limited agricultural after a public hearing. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Carrie. At this time, does the applicant want to state anything? Is he here or her? Come on up, sir. If you'd like to make a statement, name and address, please.
Daniel Ziesmer, 9838 South Chicago Road. Just like right now, that one corner of the property, there used to be an old farmhouse there. Just want to make the whole thing agricultural now.
All right, thank you. Questions from commission? Nothing? All right, motion.
Seifert moves that the Planning Commission recommends to the Common Council that the property at 9838 South Chicago Road be rezoned from RS3 single-family residential and A1 limited agricultural to A1 limited agricultural after a public hearing.
Guzekowski, second.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye. Kroll, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Thank you. Item 6D, affidavit of correction. Review an affidavit of correction submitted by Mark Tagunas, HSA Commercial, for the property at 7901 South 6th Street. Carrie?
This is for the current location of the freighter property. As you may recall, the previous CSM affecting this property prohibited access from Drexel Avenue. This allows for restricted access onto Drexel Avenue, which would allow Lot 1 to be permitted one direct access driveway to West Drexel Avenue to be used by the property owner and/or his lessee for service, delivery, and emergency vehicles only. No access for public nor employee, client, or non-emergency patients would be allowed via this driveway. You may recall that there were some conversations regarding this, and it was included as part of the approved site plan for this to be a limited access area. If the Plan Commission is satisfied with the affidavit of correction, the suggested motion is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the affidavit of correction submitted by Mark T. Grutenhuis, HSA Commercial, for the freighter property at 7901 South 6th Street be approved. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. This time, questions from the commission. You should all be pretty familiar with this one. Chauncey?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, what's the actual correction? What was changed?
Well, this is in lieu of actually doing a new CSM that would show that restriction for no access on Drexel Avenue is removed. So the affidavit is just saying that there is now access for those specified uses.
Thank you.
Wally?
How are they going to control that the public doesn't use it, et cetera? So it's only limited, I'm saying, of this.
There's two ways. One will be through signage, and as part of the site plan review, they were required to put in gates that
Would be gates.
block people from being able to access the main parking lot and also the parking garage. So emergency access vehicles would be able to lift that gate. They would have a way to do that, but they would be the only ones that would be allowed to access that from Drexel Avenue.
Good, so will be controlled, that's good.
It will be controlled.
Okay.
Did it, Wally?
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, motion.
Dickman makes a motion, the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the affidavit of correction submitted by Mark T. Grutenhuis, oh boy, HSA Commercial, for the freighter property at 7901 South 6th Street be approved.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Kroll, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay, If you bear with me, I'd like to use my discretion and move up some of the smaller items and move some people out so they don't have to sit through the entire thing. I'd like to move to the sign plan review, item F. Review a sign plan submitted by Don Schwartz, Cubanitas, for Cubanitas commercial tenant portion of the building at 7979 South Main Street.
All right, I'll take that one.
Thank you, Pete.
As always, when it comes down to Drexel Town Square, the Plan Commission has authority to review all sign plans for tenant spaces along anywhere in Drexel Town Square. In this particular case, at 7979 South Main Street, Cubanitas is looking to move in. They are proposing to have channel letter signs, and at the bottom is the tagline, Cuban food and drink. Just want to point out that cabinet signs aren't allowed, but they did redesign the sign to have that push-through lettering. I don't know if you noticed that in some of the other tenant spaces, which does meet the definition for standards for signage in Drexel Town Square. The height of the sign is 25 inches. That is the height limit for the sign plan for the development, as well as Drexel Town Square sign code. The overall size of the one sign on the main street is 15 3/4 square feet. And then the entrance sign, which is exactly the same, facing the town square, will be 17.32 square feet, which does comply with code. The applicant is not proposing any eye-level signs at this time, but if they ever do decide to put eye-level signs up, they will need to come back before the Plan Commission for approval. With that said, staff recommends that the Plan Commission approve the sign plan for the tenant space located at 7979 South Main Street.
Thank you, Pete. Questions from commission?
Yes. I have
Chelsea?
a question for the applicant.
Good evening. I'm Bob Hacker from Bauer Sign. I'm representing Dan here this evening. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you give us a little more information on why the two signs and their location?
Ask me that again, why the two signs are?
Yes, why you're requesting the two signs?
There's two different elevations of the building, one facing south, one faces Main Street. They actually are both the same size. There was a typo on the R76 in size, in the length.
Are they both entrances?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then a question for Pete, or which sign is the true size?
They're both the 7'6" length. The smaller of the two, the 15.3. Yeah.
Okay, so is the smaller sign compliant?
Yep, both sizes actually did comply, but if knowing that the smaller one is, they're going to be same size for each side, it's really a subtle difference. If you look between the two, the box at the bottom extends a little bit further out.
Yeah,
and
right.
so if what Bob says, what they'll be proposing when they come for sign permits is this one where the bottom sign matches up with the edge of the C and the S.
Correct.
So the signs as proposed do comply with both DTS sign code and the master sign plan for this development.
Thank you.
Motion.
Seifert moves that the planning commission approve the sign plan for the tenant space at 7979 South Main Street.
Guzekowski seconds.
Roll call.
Dick and I.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Bekavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye. Crowell, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
I'd like to move on to item 6G.
Thank you.
Plan review for site, building, and landscape and lighting plans submitted by HSI Oak Creek Partners LLC for Phase 2 of Drexel Ridge Apartments projects located at 7721 South Pennsylvania Avenue. Yes, I'm gonna put E off for a little bit, and then I'm gonna try to just take care of the ones where we can go through rather quickly, I'm anticipating.
Okay, this is for Phase 2 of the Drexel Ridge apartment complex, which is shown in red on your screen. There are only 2 phases to this development, so this would complete the apartment complex. And this is the plan that we're showing here. They're calling for 8 two-story residential buildings, 1 detached 5-bay garage building, a 10-foot wide pedestrian path connecting to the existing Oak Leaf Trail on the Milwaukee County property on the west here. So this would be a connection point for the trail system. Thank you very much for including that. We really do appreciate having that interconnected trail system. And if we have a close-up here of the western portion, it includes some of the buildings here. There are 4 11-unit buildings, 1 15-unit building, and 3 20-unit buildings. The total number of units is 119 for this phase. Total bedrooms, including studio, would be 190. Minimum parking is based on the number of bedrooms, and as such, 82 to 83 as a minimum would be required. As proposed, at least 218 are provided in the plans. There may be additional parking options available for the spaces directly in front of the garages, the underground garages, that would not block, pedestrian pathways. Trash enclosures are also going to be provided for each of the grouping of buildings, and they are going to be using the same fiber cement siding and vinyl fence panel gates as was proposed in Phase 1. There are 2 proposed retaining walls for the property, one on the south side of the 15-unit building here, and one on the north side of the northeast 11-unit building over here. They will be constructed of split-face retaining wall units with ornamental steel fence, the same kind of proposal that was in Phase 1 for the retaining walls. Landscape plans have been proposed. They are quite large, so I'd rather not show them on the screen unless there are some questions, but they were the same plans that were proposed as part of Phase 1. It includes screening for the trash enclosures for the 15 and 20-unit buildings. We would request that if there are additional trash enclosures that they would also incorporate landscaping for screening. The mechanicals and transformers are not shown on the plans, but they would also be required to be screened per code. So there may be a few minor revisions that may be required for the landscape plan. Staff will continue to work with the applicant and their consultants in order to address those issues. The buildings themselves will look similar to Phase 1, using the same kinds of materials, including fiber cement, siding, vertical fiber cement panels, brick, and cultured stone. Per code, the brick and stone veneer must be a minimum of 4 inches thick, like we've said on previous applications. The garages, the one detached garage would be constructed again of fiber cement siding and vertical fiber cement panels. Each building would be constructed with asphalt shingles, and the garage itself would incorporate pre-finished carriage-style garage doors, frosted glass, and fiber cement trim, again to match Phase 1. These are the elevations for the proposed 11-unit building. Again, would match pretty much closely with the 11-unit building for Phase 1. And then again, the 15-unit building to closely match Phase 1, and the 20-unit building. Per Section 17.1009 sub A2, the use of fiber cement siding and panels would require a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission, and also subsection I requires a minimum of 65% of the total exterior wall area of the multifamily residential building to be comprised of brick or decorative masonry. And although calculations for the proposed elevations, building materials have not been provided, these closely mirrors Phase 1, which were approved by the Plan Commission, and staff does note that they pretty much will be identical. It will be up to the Plan Commission to determine whether the proposed materials are acceptable. However, staff does recommend approval. The utility has provided comments saying that all public water and sewer easements must be shown on the plans. They may be missing from a couple of sheets. Also a reminder that water must loop around the south side of Phase 2. And lighting similar to Phase 1 on the building will be approved by the electrical inspector. They're proposing to use the same fixtures on the buildings. If the Plan Commission is satisfied with the plans, the suggested motion is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans for Phase 2 of the multifamily residential development located at 7721 South Pennsylvania Avenue, subject to conditions 1 through 8. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Questions? Commissioner Chandler.
The applicant available?
Oh, sure. Tony DeRosa, HSI Properties, 18500 West Corporate Drive, Brookfield.
Okay, quick question. So the colors, are they the exact same as phase one?
The exterior designs are identical.
Design?
Design
well as
materials are identical
materials?
to
Okay.
phase one.
Thank you.
Else?
Phase one looks good.
Yeah.
Looks gonna look like phase one.
How's your rentals going?
Good.
Looks really
Strong.
Good.
Yeah.
You're smiling. You're looking
Right.
happy.
We're here tonight, so.
Yeah. Phase
It's an
two is
indication
coming
of that.
much quicker than I
Yeah.
thought, so it's
Yeah.
a good sign. Good for you.
Brian?
I'm happy to see phase two coming through. Just had one request from the forester. If there can be some adjustments to the trees that line Drexel. There's great trees that are up there, but just something in your plans with phase two to kind of address just the straight line of trees along that area. If that's something you guys can take care of, be appreciated.
We'd be happy to discuss it with her.
Excellent. My only question really isn't for you. Assistant Chief Kresick, is there anything concerning this or even our item before with the road? Was there, I should have asked you, I apologize for that. Do you have any concerns whatsoever with the project?
Mike Kresick, Fire Department. No concerns as far as access. These approvals or we did meet with the applicant at the start of the project for both phases to discuss water and access roads, and nothing has changed with that, so it's acceptable to us.
Thank you. Okay. Motion.
Carl moves the commission approves the site and building plans for phase two of the multifamily residential development located at 7721 South Pennsylvania Avenue, subject to the following conditions. 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that the exterior stone veneer and brick veneer meet the minimum 4-inch thick requirement per code. 3, that all public utility easements are shown on the plans. 4, that all revised plans, site building, landscaping, lighting details, etc., are submitted in digital format for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. 5, that all mechanical equipment, ground, building, and rooftop is screened from view. 6, that the final site grading, drainage, erosion control, and stormwater management plans are approved by the engineering department. 7, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility. 8, that the final photometric and lighting plan is approved by the electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building permits.
Chandler seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Fellow, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski.
Aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay, moving on. Item 6H, review site, building, landscape, and lighting plan submitted by Tesla Motors, Inc. for an electric charging station on the Myers property at 171 West Town Square Way. Is that you, Carrie?
That would be me. Just a second to find my notes here. Here we go.
Okay. A cool item, actually.
The proposal is for a charging station in the northeast corner of the existing Meyer parking lot, which is shown in red on your screen right now. So that's just a couple of blocks over here. And this is the proposed location, and the proposal is specifically is for 10 branded electric vehicle charging posts and 10 parking stalls. 2 stalls would be removed for equipment, so for a total of 12 impacted stalls. Plan commissioners may recall that the Meyer plans were approved in October of 2013. Overall, the parking was provided for 703 vehicles, and that was for a roughly 193,000 square foot store with approximately 60 employees estimated to be on site at any time. So for those questions about minimum required parking, that would be 3.5 to 5 stalls per 1,000 gross square feet of store, which would be about 672 to 960 stalls, with the removal of roughly 10 parking stalls just in general, in terms of for general use, and 2 parking stalls which would be removed permanently for equipment. This would still leave Meyer with adequate parking for the store based on code requirements in DTS. But just, again, these 10 parking stalls aren't going away. They're just going to have charging stations in them, so they will still be utilized. There we go. These are self-service unattended charging stations that'll be available 24/7. The supercharger cabinets and switchgear assembly will be located within a composite enclosure west of the charging stalls. So they will be located here on the west side. That cabinet enclosure will also be screened with proposed arborvitae. Existing vegetation on the north will either remain or be replaced in kind. There is also going to be curb and gutter around the west, south, and east sides of that enclosure to protect it from vehicles. There may also be some bollards there to also further protect, but that's up to the applicant. Those were kind of recommended by the police department. One new utility transformer is located north of that enclosure that also needs to be screened either with arborvitae or another screening material. There would be 2 additional light poles, and those poles would also have to comply with the requirements for Drexeltown Square. So in other words, the same light pole and fixture, the Guardco, would be required in this area. And that is for lighting of the specific charging station, the stalls. No signage other than the typical parking stall sign, so the little ones, and then the Tesla name on the charging post would be proposed. So there's really no signage at all for this, other than right in front of the parking stalls. This is just a schematic of an overhead view of the enclosure. This is what it would look like on the exterior, and those little things are the charging stations. That's what the proposed parking stall sign would be. So again, it's a standard parking sign. Some equipment, the fence, and again, the landscaping plan. If the Plan Commission feels that this is an appropriate use for the area, the suggested motion is that the Plan Commission approves the site, building, and landscape plan submitted by Tesla Motors, Inc. for the property at 171 West Town Square Way, subject to conditions 1 through 5. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. Questions?
Yeah, is the
Brad?
applicant here? I have a few questions.
Welcome. Name and address, please.
Susan Faber, I'm with Black & Veatch on behalf of Tesla, 900 Oakmont Lane, Westmont, Illinois.
How is this actually
Throwing
going to
music,
work?
too.
Can you give us a little explanation of
Well,
how this charging works, and how do you pay for it? And so forth,
so
a
how
little
the
more detail.
charging works is these are called superchargers. There are 5 superchargers that will tie to one each to 2 of the charging stations. I actually have a photograph here that I might like to share if anyone's interested in taking a look at it, that has kind of a nice image of what the stations look like. The 10 parking places will be back in places because the charging is at the driver's rear, so they'll back in. There's actually one pull-in on the end. It would actually be on the west end, and that's a pull-in station for if someone wants to pull in, and it would, of course, be at the rear. They simply charge in about 35 minutes. They can be charged to drive 335 miles. There is not a charge at the time that they pull in.
What about the safety aspect as far as fires? Could there be a potential problem that way?
They certainly are safe. I do know that you requested an emergency first responder guide. I think someone had requested that. So I did bring that tonight. This would, of course, be for emergency professionals to understand exactly how the equipment works.
Right. I'm just curious, I don't own an electric car, so I'm not sure. Could these only be used to charge Teslas, or can any electric car pull in there?
They can only be used for a Tesla because of the technology. The technology is designed just for a Tesla. It's a DC charge, and that's how the technology of a Tesla works. So other electric cars could charge in a different way. Kind of like, I almost compare it like to charging a cell phone, how you would need a different charger for a different phone.
And the other question is, just kind of out of curiosity, they seem like they're the furthest spots away from the store. Is there a reason for that, why they're so far away?
Probably, I would assume, I can't say exactly why it was designed in that way. I would think that that's just the placement that was chosen between between the property owner.
How do you pay for this? You know, like you do for gas? How do you,
There is not a charge at the
No
time that they're
charge at
charging.
this
There's a
time.
credit, I believe, that's given to Tesla car owners at the time that they purchase the car for the charging.
Ollie?
I think you answered the question because it says here you're proposing to install 10 branded electric vehicle chargers. Is that to make sure that it's only for Tesla? Is that the idea when it says branded?
These are Tesla, yes, for Tesla cars.
Okay, I thought that was.
I don't have an electric car either. My question is, so if you got Tesla, so who is somebody come next with the next branded type of charger and then the next branded type of charger? I mean, is this something that we'll have a lot of them in that parking lot? Or whose call is? I know that care.
Based on what I know about it, most of them are pretty standard except the Tesla model. Most of the Toyotas, the hybrids, the Priuses, they all plug into a standard charging station based on the amperage.
And is there any kind of responsibility for these spots? Are people going to be calling the police and saying, hey, a non-Tesla car is parked in these spots?
There's a sign next to each charging station for Tesla charging. I can't imagine that that would be a problem. Just looking as I drove to the site today, there is ample parking.
Chris?
Chief Kresick, anything with the fire department or concerns in that regard to Commissioner Siepert's question?
So much like within the last couple of years, we went to the compressed natural gas stations. You know, that was a new technology for our city, and we've got at least 2 locations, possibly 3 in our city. When those were proposed and installed, we did meet with those developers and owners to go over the safety associated with that type of fueling system. This will be the same situation. We'll go over the safety for electric vehicles with the Tesla Corporation.
Thank you.
Ollie?
One more question, if I might, ma'am. You said it took, what, 35 minutes, did I hear you right, to charge it? During that time, does the person stay with the vehicle all the time, keep it locked, charge, and then go shop or something, or what's the situation?
And that's exactly how it is. There's a navigation system in the Tesla that will direct them to a charging station. For example, if I were here and needed to charge before I would head back on the road, there would be navigation in the car. Once they pull in, they would charge with the car locked. It can charge, and typically that's exactly what happens, is that they would go to Meijer in this case, they would do shopping, perhaps get a coffee at Starbucks. 35 minutes can be fully charged, and that would allow the driver another 335 miles.
My only concern really is the protection of the equipment. I mean, I think it's pretty cool the way it all works and everything. I won't bore you with questions, but as far as the primary service goes with the meters, I would really encourage some bollers, or I don't know if a guardrail's allowed, but I would really protect that. It's your primary feed in there, and could be a lot of problems. As far as backing into the Tesla things, I'm sure Tesla has it figured out the best way to protect them. I'm sure it's not the first time they've put these things in, so they should know. But primarily, I'm worried about the equipment there in the lot that's taking up the 2 spots. So I would highly encourage you to work with city planning to get some protection. So. Other than that?
I did have one more for Carrie. On the suggested motion, item 3, it says that all mechanical equipment and utility boxes, ground, building, and rooftop is screened from view. How are we going to be doing that?
Well, there's no rooftop, so you don't have to worry about that. There's no
Agreed.
building other than the enclosure, which is proposed to be screened. The only other thing is the utility transformer, and that would either be screened using vegetation, or if there would be an enclosure, which I don't think there would be for a transformer, we would be working with the applicant to make sure that it's adequately screened.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no more discussion, motion.
The Dick will make a motion, the Plan Commission approves the site, building, and landscape plan submitted by Tesla Motors Incorporated for the property at 171 West Town Square Way with the following conditions. Number 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that all final plans, site, building, lighting, etc. are submitted in digital format for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of permit applications. Number 3, that all mechanical equipment and utility boxes, ground, building, and rooftop is screened from view. Number 4, that final lighting plans indicating luminaire type, pole type, color, and height as required by the Drexel Town Square Mixed Use Plan Development District are submitted for final approval by the electrical inspector prior to issuance of permits. And number 5, that grading and erosion control plans are submitted for final approval by the engineering department prior to issuance of permits.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnson, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Clark, aye.
Bekavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Grill eye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Moving on, item 6I, certified survey map review. A certified survey map submitted by Richard Beck, Hinkle Corporation, for the property at 500 West Marquette. See you again, Carrie.
The proposal is for 2 lots to be divided in conforming size and dimension. Each will have the existing buildings. The proposal looks something like this, basically putting one line in between the 2 buildings. Again, both lots would be conforming in size and dimension following the division. There are no proposals or plans at this time to further develop each of the properties. Future development would be required to comply with all applicable portions of Chapter 17, including green and open space. The minimum requirement is 30%. If the Plan Commission feels that the proposed CSM is acceptable, the suggested motion is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Richard Beck of Henkel Corporation for the property at 500 West Marquette Avenue be approved, subject to the condition that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with the municipal code and Wisconsin statutes are made prior to recording. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Questions from the commission? Wally?
Gary, the technical corrections does cover a change in the mayor's name from Steve to Dan?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Motion.
Johnson moves that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Richard Beck, Hinkle Corporation, for the property at 500 West Marquette Avenue be approved, subject to the condition that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with the municipal code and Wisconsin statutes are made prior to recording.
Guzekowski, a second.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnson, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Clark, aye.
Bekavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Grill eye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
I'd like to just skip over J for a minute and go to K. I believe this is a rather quick one, at least in my opinion. It's a sign review for Sports Clips submitted by Steve Smith for the commercial property at 7940 South 6th. Pete.
Thank you. You may have heard me say this once or twice, but any signs proposed for Drexel Town Square is under review by the Plan Commission. If you recall, Sport Clips did come back probably, I believe it was end of June, for their original sign plan, which was for 2 wall signs. If you recall, that building is on the southeast corner of 6th and Drexel. At this time, they are proposing to have 2 eye level signs, which does fit with the length of frontage for their particular site. I don't know why that shrunk on me. This is the drawing of the glazing of the front door. What they will be having is your typical open sign, LED illuminated sign in the window, along with their hours of operation. Both of these signs meet the eye level standards of no more than 10% of the glazing being covered with signage. It does meet along with the master sign plan for this development. With that said, staff recommends that the Plan Commission approve the sign plan submitted by Sport Clips for Suite 103 of the building located at 7940 South 6th Street.
Thank you, Pete. Questions, comments from the commission? Seeing none, motion.
Seifert moves that the Plan Commission approve the sign plan submitted by Sports Clips for the Suite 103 of the building at 7940 South 6th Street.
Chandler seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnson, aye.
Pillow, aye.
Clark, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Now I'd like to take 6J, conditional use permit. Review is a request submitted by Lori Kopecki, United States Cellular Operations Company LLC, for a conditional use permit for a 120-foot monopole with a 6-foot lightning rod for a total height of 126 feet, an apparatus and a gated and fenced compound on the property at 2330 East Rawson. We do have a few people wishing to speak, so if the applicant would like to come up.
Mayor, if I may just make a general statement which may shed some light upon the Plan Commission's review of this proposal. Many of you on the commission, and for the record, Doug Seymour, Director of Community Development for the City of Oak Creek. Many of you on the commission and the audience certainly may be aware of similar situations from our neighbors in Franklin and Greendale and elsewhere where cell tower proposals have arisen and essentially their local communities had very limited ability to shape the locations of those uses and towers. And that's really due to some recent changes by our state legislators to the laws regulating the siting of cell towers. And as Carrie will go on to in a moment, I mean, they really severely restricted and, to be honest, almost eliminated the ability of local governments to regulate these types of uses in their locations. So while we're not here to question the wisdom of our state legislators in the changes that they made to the statute, which basically preclude any local control or minimize local control over the siting of cell towers, we certainly have to deal with that reality. And I will say that the loss of local control on this issue is worrisome in the sense that it really creates a challenge in preserving the integrity and the values of our neighborhoods and our communities. And against that backdrop, I just wanted to kind of provide the commission with that little bit of information, because it really frames your discussion, the council's discussion, staff's ability to raise concerns about the height of towers, the location of towers. So with that, maybe Carrie, and I may have said a few things that you had in our staff report, but I think it was important for the neighborhood in particular to understand the very limited role that has been kind of put upon this community and other communities by our state legislators in their recent changes to the state statutes with respect to the siting of cell towers.
Thank you for that information, Doug. At this time, would the speakers like to come up? I have first Dick Rogers in the house. Name and address, please.
Good afternoon. Evening, I should say. Dick Rogers, representing United States Cellular Operating Company, 100 West Henry Clay, Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. I'm just basically here to answer any questions that the commission might have on our proposed site plan that the commission has reviewed, or the plan staff has reviewed, I'm sorry.
Ellard Hashi.
Good evening, Harold Hashi, 2240 East Ash Court, Oak Creek. We received notice of this proposed tower build because our home is within 300 feet of the proposed site. Our home is part of Rawson Village Estates, which is a community of 12 homes. We reached out to our HOA president and had a petition started, and we've got 13 signatures. The petition basically states that we do not support the construction of the cell tower at 2330 East Rawson Avenue because we believe it will reduce the property values of our homes. It will reduce the success of our neighborhood, and it will reduce the quality of life for us. Another part of this is that currently in our subdivision, Oak Creek High School recently built a home that they have an accepted offer upon. We reached out to those people, and they as well are concerned, and they're in the middle of a contract, so I think they'd have every right to move away, at this point. Further, we looked into Oak Creek statute regarding antennas. And let me see. Section 17.0504 states that antennas that are greater than 60 feet in height should be, I believe, let me see here, should be set back at least 100 feet from the adjoining property. Rawson Village Estates owns the adjoining property. It's a wetland right now. It's a cornerstone of our neighborhood. The proposed site is not that distance away. So I don't know what pull the city of Oak Creek has here, but any support you could provide, we'd appreciate.
Thank you. Next, Thomas Poplero. Name and address, please.
Tom Papalardo, 2255 East Village Drive. My backyard faces, going to be facing a tower. I mean, property value in that subdivision that they know, including this one that high school just built, is going to lose value. I mean, I've been there for 25 years. We have the wetlands behind it. It's beautiful. It's naturous. You know, this isn't just us, it's South Milwaukee. I mean, it's residents all around. I just don't think it's right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have two emails that were requested to be read into the record. First one's from Jennifer Wanta, 2135 East Ash Court, Oak Creek, Wisconsin. It is dated August 3rd, 2017. It's to the Oak Creek Plan Commission regarding the meeting for the conditional use permit for the cell tower at 2330 East Rawson. I'm not able to attend the meeting on August 8th, 2017, as I will be working at our school district's elementary registration. I'd like to submit some comments and concerns regarding the proposed cell tower at 2330 East Rawson Avenue. I am a homeowner on Ash Court, approximately 600 feet west of the proposed cell tower. I only heard about this from a neighbor that received notice in their mail since they are 300 feet away from the proposed tower. I have huge concerns about the health impact that a cell tower only 600 feet away from my home could have on my family. Additionally, there are houses even closer to the tower, one that is about 300 feet away. The closest house is the beautiful newly constructed Knights Construction Home that hasn't even had their final closing date yet. There are various studies that I have come across that show that a cell phone tower should not be placed within 1,500 feet of a residential area. Our street, Ash Court, which is well within 1,500 feet, has 17 young children that will be exposed to the RF waves of this tower. This doesn't take into account the neighboring roads in our subdivisions that are also within 1,500 feet, nor does it take into account the residential dwellings right across the street in South Milwaukee. I have not found anything in my research that makes me comfortable subjecting my family to these types of radio waves. I would urge you to take an unbiased look, in parentheses, not from the cell tower company, and to do some research on your own and to see if you would feel comfortable subjecting your families to such constant wave activity. One would then maybe say move if you are not comfortable with the facts. Studies have shown that the property values can go down as much as 10 to 20% in an area where a cell phone tower is placed within 1,500 feet of a residential home. So now if this is approved, I would like to move. The value I can get for my property will drop $29,000 to $58,000. This is unacceptable. I urge you to research the health aspects and imagine your own family being that close to the proximity of the tower and vote no to the conditional use permit. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Jennifer Wanta. And she also stated there has to be a better location to put this in the city. Lastly, the comment comes from 1st District Alderman Stephen Kurkowski. He says, good afternoon. I am not able to attend the Plan Commission meeting tomorrow night and voice my opinion with regards to this item. I do not support it and would like to know if US Cell has explored other locations nearby, such as county-owned property. I suspect that locating it by the dog park might be an FAA issue, but what about the commercial property closer to Howell Avenue? Please read my comments into the record. Thank you, Stephen Kirkowski, 1st District Alderman. Okay. With that, commission, anybody? Greg?
Just curious for the applicant, why, number one, why a cell tower needs to go up?
At that site.
Presently, the network that USL has, as well as the other carriers, is sufficient for telephony. But with the advent of text messaging, sending photographs, sending data, large documents, etc., the spectrum has shrunk. So this is basically a capacity site. The sites that we have that are existing get overloaded and can't carry the signal. Consequently, there is about 15 different capacity sites being built around Milwaukee County. And it's going to get worse. If you were in a project room, that's what it's called. Like when school gets out, it lights up like a Christmas tree. It's at capacity already. Lunch times it's at capacity. Drive times it's at capacity. Because people aren't just talking anymore. They're sending documents, photographs, texts, videos. And that's the reason why we have to be in this particular location, because it ties in with the rest of the network we have in South Milwaukee, Oak Creek, Cudahy.
And have any other sites been looked at, or is this the only one?
It's pretty specific where we have to be, because if this was to move, say, a half mile, then 3 of the other sites would have to be moved half a mile so that the network ties in. It's kind of like a puzzle.
Okay, Greg? For now. Wally?
Well, you still didn't answer the question if you had looked at any other sites that are close by. Because I looked at the area also, and I think there are other places you could have gone.
Yes, within the search area that we were given, that I was given, that's about the only site that's available that's not wetland or not heavily residential.
I don't know if you could say it's not heavily residential. I drove through there, and there's quite a bit of residential area around there. Secondly, on the north of this site, there's a piece of land that's for sale for development. Who's going to buy that for development if they got a tower right there? I know I wouldn't.
Well, also for people who are developing commercial properties or residential for that matter. For instance, I just had a granddaughter. I helped her find a college to go to. The first thing she asked me is, what kind of service do they have? Everything is wireless nowadays. You need good service or you're not going to get new residents or new businesses.
I guess, Doug, I want to ask you, you started out by giving us a description of what the state has, passed, etc. What do we have as a city? What kind of controls do we have if they've taken that stuff away? I've just brought up about the development next to it. Would cost the city money, maybe?
Essentially, and I'll defer to Carrie since she's done a lot of the research on this item, but anything that in the city's local ordinances that is in conflict with the state's statute is null and void. Don't like it, but again, that's the reality that we live in. I would, if I can editorialize for just 1 second, say that there are proposals at various levels of state government that would help the situation somewhat, not totally. Those, as far as I understand, have somewhat stalled in the state legislature. So from the aspect of if there was, are individuals concerned about the ability of local municipalities to regulate such uses, they should probably take a closer look at what's pending before their local legislators in the state assembly and the Senate, and seek out what their opinions might be on the state's regulation of cell tower siting and what can be done to provide more balance in the sense that more local control and the ability to kind of factor in the value of our neighborhoods and our communities into those siting decisions. So that aside, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie. She can provide a little bit more technical detail on what we can and cannot regulate.
According to statute, political subdivision, meaning a city, may not impose environmental testing, sampling, or monitoring requirements or other compliance measures for radio frequency emissions on mobile service facilities or mobile radio service providers. So that's getting to the first question in Ms. Wenta's comments. We cannot enact an ordinance prohibiting the placement of a mobile service support structure in particular locations within the political subdivision. We cannot prohibit them. We cannot enact or enforce an ordinance related to radio frequency signal strength or the adequacy of mobile service quality. We cannot disapprove an application based solely on the height of the mobile service support structure or on whether the structure requires lighting. Consequently, this does not require lighting. We cannot disapprove an application based on an assessment by the political subdivision of the suitability of other locations for conducting the activity. And we cannot impose a setback or fall zone requirement for a mobile service support structure that is different from a requirement that is imposed on other types of commercial structures. So in other words, they have submitted a fall zone analysis. We could not require an additional setback for that fall zone analysis. We would have to abide by the setbacks that would be allowed for any commercial business in the B2 district. The proposal is for a 120-foot tall wireless telecommunications monopole with a 6-foot lightning rod and the associated equipment. They have provided letters from the FAA and the county airport. They do not object. U.S. Cellular will construct the tower in the equipment enclosure. I do have the plans if anybody would like to discuss those. This is what the parcel looks like now, and the proposed enclosure is this square behind the building. It's a 38 by 40 cyclone fence enclosure with an 8-foot tall fence and 1 foot of barbed wire on top. In the enclosure would be the pole, the equipment cabinets, the meters, and the associated equipment. We don't know where the existing structure, the Quonset hut, which is currently in that location, would be relocated to. I would imagine that if it is to remain on the property, we would have to take a look at that in terms of site plan review for the next step. And just a note that was included in your staff report, this would not be a commission recommendation of the proposed conditional use or an the recommendation would not be an endorsement of any site, architectural, landscaping, or lighting plan that may be required. So in other words, approval of this conditional use permit does not necessarily mean that the site plan that's before you is automatically approved. It would have to come back before the Plan Commission. The applicant is aware of that extra step. So you would have another chance to look at these plans. However, this is what's being proposed. Again, the pole, the associated equipment behind this enclosure. And it is cyclone fencing with barbed wire on all sides.
Yeah. We're both with two things. First off, if we have the ability to show us where in Oak Creek the other cell phone towers currently located in somewhat residential areas are. And then secondly, we've been up here a long time, Wally. We heard a lot of these home value conversations in my backyard with the development at the We Energy Towers. And that development is completely filled in some nice homes at high values. And those towers over there are a lot more distracting than this. So I kind of struggle with this 20% number on the real estate. Although it is a factor that I admit, but we also heard that before We Energy went in, and that's a pretty nice development over there. I'm just curious where these other towers in the city are.
We do have one at the street department, and the closest subdivision being directly across the road on Putes, and also to the north Glen Crossing, which are 300,000 plus homes, probably within a quarter mile, nowhere near as close as this. There's one by the Little League Park, which is basically in an industrial area. There's one
Legion.
The Legion has one, and also the storage facility over on Ryan.
Fire department.
And who can forget the fire department?
I'm not sure if you mentioned the one that's on 27th Street by Pick and Save.
No, I
It's a
forgot about.
flagpole, but it's what do they call it? It's a mask. It's a camouflage.
A giant flag is a
That
cell
is
tower?
that is a pole.
That is clever. I never knew that.
But how many, so in all, in neighborhoods or subdivisions, we've got about 4 or 5 that you're saying?
You know, just to make a point here, I feel for you. I don't think this is an appropriate location myself. I do feel it is a little too close to that residential area. Mr. Rogers is right. We spin on technology these days. We need this stuff. We're all guilty of it. I'm carrying 2 phones myself. We need this technology as we're moving forward. I don't know where the happy median lies, but unfortunately, as Doug and Carrie stated, local control has been taken away as to what we can actually do with this. And although I feel for you, we really, we're kind of powerless to do what we do. As Doug said, it really lied with state legislature as to who had control of this, whether they did or they gave it to local control. And unfortunately, we did not get it. So we do have very little to say in that regard. Yes, go ahead, Chris.
One other question I had, they had mentioned, is it Harold? Harold had mentioned also the property or the wetland that is part of the subdivision. How does that all factor into whether it's far enough away or not far enough away?
It's not proposed in the wetland. It's proposed on existing impervious surface.
But is it far enough? Do they have to have?
We have no control over that.
And again, just getting back to it, I'm not trying to devalue the effect this is going to have on the immediate neighborhood, but in time, you tend not to notice these things. I mean that sincerely. They just become part of the landscape, and you kind of go with them. I had that happen at Glen Crossing. People were very upset in the 2nd District about this cell tower, and after it went in, the biggest thing was the paint color in the end. We had a choice on the paint color, and they painted it the color of the sky, and I've never heard a word beyond it. So it's a little consolation, but again, we don't have a whole lot of power in this one. Mr. Rogers, would you like to say something?
Just a couple of things, and for the residents here, we don't want to make any enemies. I mean, we don't like to build towers. The first job I have is to find an existing structure high enough that'll work. Well, obviously in this part of Oak Creek, there aren't any that high, and like I said, it had to be quite site specific. And to follow what you were saying, Mr. President, I'm sure our forefathers didn't want a telephone pole every 200 feet, but they wanted telephone service. We're kind of in the same scenario. We probably don't like what are the sewer covers that are all clanking and busting your rims and flattening your tires, but we need to have a sewer. This is almost, we're a quasi-utility at this point. Someday, wireless probably will be a utility, and then I guess it's kind of similar to where we are now. We go where the sites are needed, not because we want to put them there. We have to put them there to make the network work. Thank you.
Commissioner Chandler?
Okay, so for what's within our control, so height is within our control?
Height is not within our
It
control.
is not. Distance from the residence is
No.
not in our control?
No, it is not.
Color of the
color
pole.
of the pole is not in our control. Okay.
Probably not, because we can't regulate aesthetics.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So what is actually in our control?
Very little.
Very little,
Okay.
as I said.
I'm just curious.
If I may, I believe, and we'll certainly do as much research as we can when it comes back for conditions and restrictions and when it comes back for site plan review. To the extent that something is not specifically countermanded by the state statute, we still have that local authority. So essentially, if it's not, if there is nothing in the state statute that prohibits it, and there is an existing local ordinance that regulates that activity or the location of that activity, we do have that. What that is, I can't tell you right now. We'll take a look at that. For instance, I think I mentioned in the staff report something with respect to the setback for equipment areas. And we'll take a look at that just to make sure that, I mean, there's nothing in the state statute that restricts our ability to monitor and to set appropriate setbacks for any structures in the B2 zoning district. So in essence, we would take a look at the proposed site plan at the appropriate time, and this is not the appropriate time, to make sure that to the extent that we can regulate the site plan, we would do that.
So at this point, it sounds like us being against it going there and saying there's more appropriate places in the city for it, the state says we can't do that. So if we said no to it, does the state come in and say, you said no, but it doesn't matter, we overrule you guys?
The state wouldn't do it, but we would be subjected to a lawsuit.
Okay, I
Ollie?
do have additional.
I'm sorry. Chauncey, you got the floor. Sorry.
So, are there any records supporting or denying what the residents are saying in regards to health issues or in regards to real estate cost increase, decrease?
We have no reports that would support or deny those claims. I can only point to the statute that says that we have no control over the radio frequency requirements. As far as property values, that's not something that's in the statute that is a limitation or even mentioned, but property values, to be perfectly honest, every possible development in the city affects property values to some extent. What the effect of a proposed cell tower has on property values, I have no information.
Thank you.
Please approach. Toms. I gotta be on the microphone, sir. You gotta be on the microphone, sir.
Is there a picture or any idea of what this thing is actually supposed to look like?
At this
Oh, sure.
time,
Well, I
Is
thought
there?
they gave us a drawing.
oh,
We can show you on the screen.
Yeah.
Tom Papalardo, 2255 East Village Drive, Oak Creek.
This is the view from Rawson Avenue, slightly west. And this would be the view from Nicholson Avenue, slightly south.
again, you know, I'm not saying it's great, but they do tend to become part of the landscape. It actually, you throw a flag on there, draw more attention to it, probably.
To Commissioner Lork's point, regardless of how passionate we are one way or the other, based on the state stand, it's almost treated like a utility, as stated, and we really don't have a lot of
Say so.
flexibility.
But, Dan,
Go ahead, Wally.
I want to pick Pat's brain a little. You remember other times that they've come before us with these towers, they actually showed us the signal strength, the pattern, the areas they were going to cover. They made us part of the whole plan.
I think that's the next, would that be in the next, when they come back? No, they just don't have
No,
to do
I
that.
said-
You're right, so we had that all before
Yeah.
and a little bit better
It's
argument.
almost like they made us part of the decision, if you want to say. Right now, it just says, here it is, take it or leave it. And I just feel so uncomfortable about it. And you,
We had a
especially
lot
with the
more
people.
knowledge going through the years. They had to give us a lot more information about
Yeah.
it. Correct. Sounds like we don't get that shot.
Yeah.
On the screen is the
Oh, it's been
coverage.
more than
That's coverage area. The dotted line.
Airport South site that they're putting in. I don't know what this is.
That's showing us what'll be covered from the new tower.
Yeah. You can see
The dotted line.
the dotted line.
Yeah. So are these other the other service people, the other phones? I mean, where are they at on things like this? We just as they come forward.
I guess maybe that, if I maybe that might be a good question with respect to additional questions that you posed regarding the coverage area might be best posed to the applicant. But also another great question, Pat. I mean, what opportunities do they have for co-location for other providers?
Which we've tried to do in the past to put multiple providers on the same tower, correct?
I think on the record, please.
You need to come
on
up
the
to the
mic, you've got
microphone,
it.
sir.
In recognizing that there are master lease agreements between all of the major carriers, in other words, we can go on theirs, they can go on ours, no questions asked. The rent is the same, nobody's stiffing anyone else. So all of our towers that we construct at US Cellular are a minimum of 3 carrier towers. In this particular case, since it's a lower tower, I mean, we can go up to 5 carriers, but the height of this structure at 120 feet is relatively low. The standard height for a cell tower is 150 feet, which leaves the space at 140 and 130. In this case, at 120, 110 is open and 100 or 90 is open, and not too many people in this topography want to go that low. So we do have space for 2 other carriers. We can make it 3 if the commission recommends.
And when do we deal with that, Doug? At the next?
You can just make it one of the conditions of the CUP.
At this? Okay.
That would come, like, the conditions and restrictions
When
would
it comes
come in the
back.
subsequent meeting, correct?
Okay. I mean, I just think that's important, in any of our heartburn at US Cellular could be shared amongst the other carriers.
Yes, if you want to say something, please name and address.
My name is Nicole Hoshi, and I'm at 2240 East Ash Court. We were my understanding is the only home that was notified of this hearing, or I guess meeting. And I guess I realize I'm kind of beating a dead horse at this point, it sounds like, but, we do live probably one of the closest houses to where this tower is going to be built, and every night and every morning, my son opens up his blinds and we look out the window to check the weather. And the corner room where my son is at, it would be a direct view of the cell tower. So right now we have a beautiful view of the wetlands, and right now there's trees, and then in the winter we watch the snowfall, and then there's going to be this tower. I mean, to me that's not it kind of diminishes the quality of our living experience there, and we love where we live, and this is just a really big, I don't know, bummer problem for us. And one of the things I wanted to also ask about, and that my husband brought up a little bit, is just in the statutes, and I know probably state trumps city, but we just wanted to bring it up, is so with the towers being less than 100 feet from the HOA property wetlands, is that something that's going to be taken into consideration as far as the placement of the tower versus where the border is with the HOA property wetlands, because that is less than 100 feet.
Doug?
According to the state statute, we cannot impose any setback regulation greater than that which we will impose on a commercial building in that same zoning district. So, for example, the rear setback, which I think is in this case 25 feet for a commercial building, we can't impose anything greater than that for a rear setback for the tower or the tower structure, or the side setback, or whatever that might be. So I guess the answer to your question is no, we could not enforce that part of our ordinance.
I guess as a mom, I just had to, say my piece, because we love our house and we love where we live, and
I know.
it's a bummer,
Again, we feel for you. It's unfortunate.
And I just also want to say it was a little, I don't know, for lack of a better word, offensive that you said that it wasn't a highly populated area, a residential area, because it is. We live in a cul-de-sac, and there's not a huge amount of houses in the cul-de-sac. There's 12, I think. but there's also houses behind us and across the street as well. So it is a highly residential area with a lot of children, and a lot of families and young families too. So it is that. So I just wanted to address that as well. Thank you.
Dawn?
If we can't move it and change it, can we at least, so that she looks out the window, is not going to see a cyclone fence? Can we make them put a nice fence up? Okay.
We'll check into that, but I can just tell you that based on the statute, and we'll look into it a little bit further with regard to anything that's not the tower itself, we do not have the authority to disapprove an application to conduct an activity described based solely on aesthetic concerns.
But having said that, I will say that the city has, in its most recent approval of the cell tower granted on the city property, required a masonry enclosure for the equipment relative to the cell tower at the fire department.
We did. Any more questions, comments? Motion. Oh, sorry, please. Name and address again.
Harold Hoshi, 2240 East Ash Court. I just wanted to say that a 120-foot cell tower is not a power transmission line which we're used to. It's a much larger item, and this kind of sets a precedent for the future. I mean, if they're going to expand, the aesthetics of the city matter. So if we, if you give an inch, you might have them all over the city eventually, and what does that look like?
Again, I urge you, call your state representative, discuss how they felt about it.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion.
Dan, could I just ask, what is your plan, sir? What is your plan as far as when you think the tower might be able to go in if the thing ultimately gets approved? Is it a long-term situation, or are you going to go as fast as possible?
Typically, this is the first step. We have to have FAA approval, which we already have, in this case, FCC approval, NEPA, SHPO. About 40 Indian tribes have to be notified in case of burial grounds. So it's about from this point forward. Some of those applications have already been made, but I'd guess the construction for this particular site is based for the fourth quarter of this year, if possible.
Oh, that's soon.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, motion.
Someone's gotta. Corral moves that the commission approves the site. Oh, I already moved on from that. Corral moves that the commission recommends that the common council approves a conditional use permit allowing a wireless telecommunications pole and associated facility on the property at 2330 East Rawson Avenue after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the commission's review at the next meeting.
Johnson seconds.
Roll call.
In 30 years, I've never felt that I wanted to vote against something, and I feel I'm forced to say yes. So I will say yes. Yay.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Reluctantly, yes.
Kuzikowski, no.
Corral, aye.
Seaford, yes. Even against my better judgment.
Chandler, aye.
There you go. Thank you for your patience on that. Last but not least, thank you for your patience in bringing this one to the very end. Item 6E, we have a plan review. Review site plan, landscape, lighting plans submitted by Richard Barrett, Barrett Low Visionary Development for Phase 2 Emerald Row Apartments on a property at 8001 South 6th Street. Carrie?
I'm going to keep my comments brief as the applicant has a presentation to give. Basically, I just want to say that this is Phase 2, which is south of Phase 1 for Emerald Row Apartments. It's in the residential subdistrict. We have lots of plans to go through this evening, and I would anticipate that we have some things to discuss. And I will reserve further comment until following the presentation by the applicant.
Matt?
Hello, thank you so much. Matt Rinka, 756 North Milwaukee Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53202. We're very excited to be here and presenting Phase 2 of Emerald Row at Drexel Town Square.
Hi everybody, Rick Barrett here, excitedly for this project.
Should I just present the design? Okay. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the site plan incorporating the level 1 floor plan. The design incorporates essentially 3 wings and 2 courtyard spaces, 2 buildings sitting over underground parking. So very similar to Phase 1 Emerald Row. This plan, essentially the ground level units are raised up about 5 feet, 3 to 5 feet off of the sidewalk level, with walk-up units on the ground level, as well as several floors above that. We've got, oops, that's okay. We've got some renderings that we can show you here, but essentially most of the parking for Emerald Row Phase 2 will be underground. We've got a little bit of parking on grade just south of on the south side of the site. This is a view at the northeast corner, looking at the project from the town square. On the corner, we've activated the corner component with the fitness center, which is all glassed in. You can see the rooftop of the fitness center, and the north building, I would call it, is actually pulled back to create, on the next rendering, a smaller entry court. Not as grand, obviously, as Phase 1, but we felt that the entry court was a unique experience that was very successful on Phase 1. We really wanted Phase 2, even though it's the Phase 2 of Emerald Row, to have really its own identity, its own main entrance, and a sense of a place and arrival as you get to the main entrance. This is a view looking a little bit closer at that main entrance court. Basically, it's a great drop-off area. The main lobby and amenities are on the ground level, and I can go into the amenities and what's in the main lobby space in more detail if you'd like. We're looking at really lush landscaping, possibly a water feature. We're going to have to look at budgetary concerns on some of this, but the landscaping that we're looking at will be lush. The front at entry of Phase 2, we actually have the entry sort of set back to create a nice front porch at the entry court. The 2 buildings are actually split on axes with the library across the street. So there's actually an opening between the 2 buildings, which aligns with the main entrance on the west side of the library. And you can see here, this is a view looking, you can see there's a ramp that leads up to the north courtyard. And there's actually another view of this, giving a little bit closer view of and this is actually, there's going to be a breezeway connecting on the ground level, the north building to the south building, and there'll be a gate here allowing people to access the courtyard, and the north courtyard directly from the sidewalk. The upper floors are all connected by a sky bridge, as you can see the 3 levels above the ground level. The facade, very similar to Phase 1, has a lot of articulation. balconies that face the public streetway are mostly inset, as you can see here. And then we've really accentuated the corners with these wraparound balconies for the corner units. Again, lots of accentuation. These definitely are not boxes that you might see on other apartment buildings. The north courtyard will have a pool very similar to the Phase 1 pool. All the residents, every unit has an outdoor space, whether it's a balcony or a terrace on the courtyard levels. Another view of that north courtyard pool. Another view looking north. And then the south courtyard we've made into a very heavily landscaped sort of, I would say, more secluded courtyard feel. The north courtyard more activated. It's got outdoor kitchen, outdoor seating areas, and amenities that essentially flow right outside of the main lobby and club room that'll be in the north building. This, the south courtyard, with its sort of private walkways, more heavily landscaped courtyard, you can actually see we've got some of the larger units surrounding this courtyard. The balconies are larger, and quite a bit of articulation on both north and south inside courtyard facades as well. Again, some of the views will have reflecting pools. This is more about being able to take a nice walk within the courtyard space. Places for people to sit and rest. So I'll run through these floor plans. We can always come back to these if people have any questions. The lower level underground parking will be accessed on the north side off the north entry drive that currently exists. We're actually taking, I believe, 3 stalls out to get access to the underground structure. One of the reasons for the access point where it is it eliminated the need for a long ramp into the parking structure, since that's the lowest portion of the site. You can see here the underground structure very efficiently laid out. We've got 3 cores or 3 elevator cores for the buildings, one on the north, one in the center, and one on the south, as well as stair access. We are looking at constructing a bike storage building on the west side of the lower level, and since that's the low part of the site that's actually exposed and allows residents to access their bikes directly off the bike path. On the south, you can see here, which is actually at grade. You can see the site parking at grade on the south end of the site. Going to the ground level, you can see really the 2 courtyards, the north courtyard with the pool, outdoor seating areas, outdoor kitchen spaces, and then the south courtyard and the 3 wings that surround the courtyard spaces. The entry court on the east side of the north building with the fitness center activating the corner, as well as the parking at grade on the south. And then the levels 2, 3, and 4 reflect up. That's what we wanted. There's more detail in the actual submission, but we wanted to at least give you a broad overview of the project.
Carrie, you got anything else?
Most of the details were included in the lengthy report. So I think what I'm going to do is go through some of these comments just very quickly. We did have some amendments that were going to be required for some of the plans, and that would be inclusive of having easements shown on all of the plans. Some of them are missing the easements, particularly for the North Public Path. That one will need to be amended because of the slight variation in the location due to the access to the underground parking. Also, the fire department gave us some comments regarding concern for hydrant and FDC placement, as well as being able to turn around on the south portion of the property, and I will defer to the fire department to elaborate on those, but I'll plow through for right now. Similar to phase one, the question of where the trash is going to be stored, well, it's in the garage. And how is that going to be handled? Well, there are two specific lifts that go to the ground level for the trash, and those trash containers will be wheeled out on trash day, and then they'll be wheeled back into the garage. So we've got that question all squared away. Snow is going to be completely removed from the site. There is no snow storage capacity on the site as it's proposed. There was a concern about the connection to the stormwater pond in the south, and the recommendation is that that be relocated or revised such that it connects to the storm sewer infrastructure. There was one question about the proposed lighting. The poles and the fixtures were a little bit different from what was approved by Drexel Town Square, and after a little bit of explanation, there was a confirmation that the approved cyclone fixtures will be used for the public parking areas. And as Matt had mentioned, most of the landscaping is going to be in that courtyard area. So that's where a majority of the proposed landscaping and green space will be, including the ponds and the Zen gardens. Again, easements have to be shown on the landscape plans as well. And there are no utilities, transformers, or mechanicals at ground level that are shown. Those are probably going to have to be sited at a later date, but those will have to be screened. Anything on the roof is proposed to be screened by the parapets and set back from the street so that they're not seen from the public areas. And with regard to the building itself, I don't know why that just changed, but it did. Anyway, the building itself, there we go. Proposed to be constructed of similar materials to phase one. So we are looking at fiber cement panel and lap siding. Am I saying this correctly? Phenolic? Phenolic panel siding. So that's cedar panel and glass guardrails. Basically trying to incorporate the same kind of feel as Emerald Row Phase 1. Aluminum storefronts for the fitness center lobby, internal courtyard accesses, and bridge pathway. I'm trying not to restate things that Matt has said already. We talked about the private walk-up accesses that'll be on the south, east, and northeast. You'll notice in this image there is an angled roof that's facing 6th Street. There's a proposal at this time for that to be to incorporate a recessed light fixture. We'll need some more details if that turns out to be a feature that does remain. As far as the security gate is concerned, Matt kind of mentioned that to prevent unauthorized access to the pool area from public areas, provides a little bit of privacy, and we'd like to thank the consultants for the discussion that we had about the other proposed security fences and going with a glass railing instead. Thank you very much for doing that. As far as the foundation is concerned, there is exposure on a couple of the elevations, particularly on the north side and on the west side. It's exposed by more than 9 feet in some areas. That does allow for the bike storage to be placed in a very good place. That'll hide some of the foundation, but we do recommend that some kind of aesthetic treatment be placed on the foundation to kind of minimize that, or incorporate some landscaping that would kind of hide that a little bit more. In terms of glazing, the percentages on the east side is maximized. The requirement is for a minimum of 25%. They're showing 41%. And I just lost my place. My apologies. There were some concerns that were raised by staff, different departments. There is a potential for footings and foundations to encroach into the public path on the west. However, that's not new from what was seen in phase one, so there would have to be very close coordination between the construction and the engineering and inspection departments to ensure that everything is okay. And as far as construction is concerned, there were some questions as to the details for construction, such as stockpile areas, parking for construction workers, maintenance of the public ways during the construction, because there are two public access points, one on the north, one on the south, how those would remain open during construction, and then some other construction-related questions. Rather than going into that any further, what I'd like to say is that we are probably on the topic of parking at this point. And there were some calculations that were provided to the Plan Commission in the report, and there were, after some conversations regarding parking and some other things, 3 additional recommendations for potential conditions of approval that were provided to the Plan Commission. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to everybody else who has something to say on this. And if there are any questions, feel free to ask them, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Carrie. Before I turn it over to the commission, we have one resident patiently waiting. Sharon Armstrong, if you'd like to come up, please.
Sharon Armstrong, 7013 South 13th Street, Oak Creek. This letter, I'd like to read it, please. It's been sent to Doug Seymour at the Department of Community Development. On behalf of the Oak Creek Library Board of Trustees, I write today to share the board's concern about the elimination of the 5 parking spaces on 6th Street that are heavily used by library patrons. The library board understands and looks forward to the further development of Drexel Town Square. We recognize that our beautiful facility is an anchor in the development and a selling point for the soon-to-be residents of the next phase of the Emerald Row Apartments. We are cognizant of the overall plan for Drexel Town Square and recognize that creating an urban living environment is a suburban setting comes with unique challenges. However, as board members, we are obligated to be the voice of our patrons. The number one complaint library staff and board members hear from library users is the lack of easily accessible parking space to the library, and in particular, the negative impact it has on our elderly and disabled patrons. Based on the regularity of these complaints, we are concerned about how the elimination of any parking on 6th Street near the library will affect our patrons. We are anxiously awaiting the creation of additional parking around Drexel Town Square, as was outlined to the board by Mayor Bukevich and the library director. However, the additional parking will still be a fair distance from the main entrances of the Civic Center, and so will not alleviate the parking complaints from library patrons. We feel it is important to share the concerns we hear from our patrons with the planning department, not because we wish to hinder any development in Drexel Town Square, but because we believe that it is important that city staff be aware of the concerns of Oak Creek residents. As the plan moves forward, the board requests that city staff continue to keep the library director appraised of the developments related to the next phase of the Emerald Row Apartments. As the buildings come out of the ground, library staff will be the frontline staff in the Civic Center, receiving the most questions about the development and how it will impact library services. Continued clear communication between the city and the library administration will be a necessary tool in providing quality information and services to Oak Creek residents. Please feel free to contact myself or Library Director Jill Lininger with any additional questions or concerns you or your department may have. Sharon Armstrong, Library Board President. I also have a couple comments, things that I just wanted to add. The library staff actually receives numerous complaints on a weekly basis about the lack of parking. There are several elderly or handicapped people that are unable to get into the library from the south entrance. If they're on crutches or walk with their cane or even two canes, it is just too far. And I pointed out to Mr. Seibert on the way in, if you see, and there's only 4 handicap spaces. It's quite a trek to get into the library. We have heard from several patrons that they no longer come to the library because they are unable to walk from the south and they cannot find spaces to the west. To the west, there are 2 spaces that are 5-minute parking and 5 spaces that are 2-hour parking on the east side of 6th Street. There are currently 12 spaces on the west side of 6th Street that are 2-hour parking, and 5 of those could be eliminated. We have been watching the 2-hour parking spaces, which are across the street to the west. Many times there are cars that are parked there over 5 hours, and we've noticed the cars many times are the same cars. We can only assume that they either work in the area or are living in the apartments. The library board feels that all of the parking actually to the west should be made library parking only during library hours. Last fall, the library board did a strategic planning session. One of our goals is more programming for people of all ages. When we have programs that are of interest to the senior citizens, those few handicap parking spaces to the south and 6th Street parking is far from being sufficient. Another concern is that if parking is taken away, it's going to be the library staff that will be fielding the questions. Why and where are we supposed to park? The board simply feels that we are already at a disadvantage with parking and we cannot afford to lose any more. The library is for Oak Creek residents and we should give them the courtesy of a parking space. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Just to address it, you're not in a minority. Parking is at a premium for everybody. To delegate just street parking for library, I don't know if that's fair to every resident here either that does not choose to use the library. My compromise would be if those spaces do go away, there are 4 spaces next to the handicap. They could be designated as library parking during library hours for elderly and expectant mothers, things of that nature. But again, it would be up to library staff to police that because there's truly no way to police it. We're in a very odd situation that we're looking for answers for. Yeah, microphone, Sharon. Come on up, Sharon.
If those handicap spots, you said, we could make them library parking only, then where would the handicap parking be?
No, the handicap would stay there. And
stay there, and it would be.
Keep in mind, and I just learned this recently because of parking issues, public streets provide no handicap parking anywhere.
I know.
It's only private lots, so I can only assume that when they laid out City Hall lots, they went per code on how many spots they needed.
Okay.
So, again, it would be very tough to police that, short of it being handicap, if it was for elderly only. With that, Andrew, you want to add anything, or should we open it up for questions from the commission first?
Curious, sticking kind of with the parking issue. Some of the renderings, first off, I love the buildings. I think they look great. Some of the renderings, it looks like other than the driveways, you have cars digitally put in there. Is there plans to actually leave a couple spots other than the driveways, or is that whole facing entrance of the building going to have no parking, basically?
You're
Just a couple
talking
of
about just the east drop-off area?
Where the Circle Drive is, the
Oh, yes,
carport.
yeah.
Some
the-
of them
the
have a
carport.
car actually parked in between the driveways and things like
It's just
that.
a
Is that-
rendering showing that is specifically for vehicles to be able to come in, drop off someone off. Deliveries vehicles could go in and drop off packages, that sort of thing.
But just addressing, I mean, the library board's concerned with the 5 spots. The plan is for those
Sure.
5 spots to be gone.
This is a $36 million project. It has to impact. You have to get into it. You have to get out of it. I don't know that. While I sympathize and a huge library supporter, you can't put a $35 million or $36 million building up without impacting the public ways in some form. Obviously, we're trying to minimize it. But the needs of residents having guests that can drop people off, that's something that I think is going to be required with this many units going in. We had discussed potential replacing of some of those stalls to the south of the property, and that might be something that we've talked
That's
to the
further away
engineers
from the
about.
door. That's further away from the entrance.
That wouldn't be,
understand that.
again, it wouldn't be library parking. There's truly no
street
dedicated.
parking.
Correct.
It's street parking.
Correct.
So within the complex, 5 would go away, 5 would come further south, approximately the pond area. Doug?
And I think you're absolutely right, Mayor. It's very difficult to talk about parking without talking about it in the global sense. And that what I mean is that there are a number of initiatives that are out there, some of which are more refined than others, that will attempt to address the perceived shortages of parking in Drexel Town Square. And you're right, Sharon, in the case that, I mean, we have not been enforcing the limitations on parking. We will certainly, moving forward, look at doing so. But as we talk about how that street parking is utilized, I think it's important to note, and we did some of our own kind of unscientific research, that a good portion of that is currently being used by the apartment residents. And we're working on things such as working with the management company about lease issues and certainly working with Matt and his team on phase 2 to rectify some of those issues. But for every parking space that we can get back into the project, that takes a parking user off of the spaces in Drexel Town Square, which opens it up for those types of users that may be using the library, maybe using the restaurants, maybe using the town square. So when we talk about specific parking situations, I just urge you to keep in mind that there's a larger discussion taking place in a more global sense about different parking potential solutions at Drexel Town Square.
I guess phase 2, parking seems to be the biggest concern, the whole area. The amount of parking spots per apartment then is more so than phase 1. Correct, if I'm reading that correctly, 1.36.
That's correct.
So
Yeah,
ratio,
1.36.
1.36 compared to 1.15. So they've made some attempt to provide more space per person coming in, but it doesn't change the street parking that's already being used by residents. That somehow, it seems to me, has to be resolved to take care of the not only the library issue, but in general. It doesn't seem that there's been any, I mean, basically it's additional residential parking at this point, what's on the street.
No, we have many factors that are leading to our problem here. For one, we have a highly successful development that's 100% rented out. And I'm no real estate expert, but in all the talks I had, they probably never expected this, or probably had a vacancy rate of maybe 5 to 7% factored in. So you start to get that. The other thing within the lease agreements, and there's families actually moving in here. So as you get into a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom situation, you can have 4 adults with 4 cars. So that's adding to the dilemma also, which we may not have addressed in the first place, adding to the problems. Okay? We also opened up quite a few businesses that are impacting things that need to be parked. And naturally, the easiest thing for people to do is park closer, convenient. We've yet to fully build out. We still have some parking lots along Main Street that can go in to help absorb some of this. So there's some management issues with this. I guess I'll be guilty and just say a little bit of lack of planning on our part too. And basically, we're running out of land. That's the bottom line. So, we're trying to make some corrections going forward.
So is there any big picture answer as this development continues to fill in? Maybe somebody can answer that for us.
Maybe
That's
I can
gonna
address
solve that.
Maybe I can address that in some of those global solutions Doug was talking about. And I don't ever want to characterize this as a parking problem because I really don't think it is a parking problem personally. I think it's a timing issue. We haven't executed all of the remedies or all of the planned parking that we had thought of globally. Yet we have great occupancy in the multifamily units and obviously successful development overall. So parking strategies in play. If we want to do a 2,000 person event here, we're going to have a parking issue. But the big parking issue or the big parking remedy for that is the ramp at Freighter. And you see, these are not going to be fully employed and fully enjoyed until next summer. So we really don't have a good understanding of what we have the before. We don't really know what the after is going to be. And I would say that, 99 days out of 100, parking functions fine here. We have those exceptions that Sharon spoke of with the library. And I actually think that the solution that Dan put forward, the mayor put forward, might be a better solution because I think from a convenience standpoint, 242 additional units, the likelihood that library patrons would be, enjoying these to the west as frequently as they do may wane with just the new development in general. We're going to net back the 5 spots that we're losing with the pull-through, the entryway, someplace else on 6th Street.
But not across the street from the library.
Correct. No. But again, I think if you employ the solution right here, it might be a better situation in general.
But not across the street, it's down there.
Not as close, but more likely to be open.
Yes.
Or available.
Yes. So, we have the parking ramp, and that's really for contractual rights to using that for large events and things like that. I think there's a capacity of 420 some spots in that ramp when we need them for large events. In the next probably 2 council meetings, and then before you guys later on, this commission, we'll be looking at this development to the south that's been long awaited. We'll actually have, when they're not using those, which this company is a pretty typical 9-to-5 type of a business, an additional 100 spots that are available. There will be capacity at all times because they're only going to park about 50 employees there, and then some visitor traffic and that kind of thing. So we'll have that capacity, and that will also look aesthetically and be signed and that kind of stuff, so we know the public knows that they can use that. Probably the next in order of priority is the parking field towards Drexel Avenue. When those multi-tenant retail mixed-use buildings continue to go in, we will continue to build out, the developer will continue to build out that parking field. And that should alleviate some of the, as was planned with off-peak and different peaks of parking demand, that should alleviate a lot of that. A lot of the congestion that we're seeing around the square now with the retail folks, the restaurant folks, and the surplus from the multifamily all vying for those public spaces around the square. We should see that wane a little bit too. And then lastly, and really folds into this discussion, we've been working on a potential partnership with Rick and his team for the lot. If I can just bring it up here, I'll show you what I mean.
And while he's bringing that up, just one more point, that road going into Freighter on the far south side, I believe we picked up another 10 spots? 11 spots there with parking by a redesign.
And that's what I'm showing you now, just to give you some perspective of where I'm at if I grab my right browser here. This is the Freighter complex up here. This is the private road off of 6th Street that Dan was just speaking of. So this is the existing Emerald Row building. This is to the north. There's an old triangular piece of land that we've been working on some shared concepts with with Emerald Row, wherein they would take the 62 stalls for their private on-site needs that they have in phase one. And then we would have some additional public parking capacity, about 30 spots further to the north there, and you can kind of see the two different parking lots. So I think the discussion, I mean, to cut to the quick, the discussion is, as you saw, one of the potential conditions that we want the commission to speak of is, are we comfortable with the ratios where they're at, or do we require parking to satisfy the needs of the development? Looking at this as phase one and phase two, do we require parking to be had privately here, and to what degree? Do we just like the idea of 30 public stalls and 62 private stalls that can count towards the Emerald Row? Or is the commission more comfortable with saying, we want Emerald Row to take all 92 of those and add to their parking ratio? That's really, I think, to boil it down to the brass tacks of tonight, what I think the conversation should revolve around. And we haven't fully vetted out exactly how this partnership would work, because we're here before you because we needed to know those parameters as a staff to say, what's the commission thinking? Do we need to add additional capacity here for Emerald Row? Does Emerald Row need to add capacity here? And of course, the applicant and developer has something to say about that as well. So we have to hear what those concerns are with how that carousel of parking might work. It's not easy. It's not as easy for the developer to look at, oh, it's phase 1A and 1B. It's all one. Let's rectify the parking fields. It's a little easier for us to think that way. So I think there's some nuances there that we need to take into consideration.
Let's go left to right. Wally, you're begging to talk down there.
Yes.
So go for it.
Yeah, we've been talking about all the parking around. I want to talk about the parking just of this particular structure. You were talking about these 62 stalls, and you said that was part of phase one. That grouping, was the 50 in phase one already part of the 62, or is the 62 in addition to the 50? That's one. I'm just going to keep going. When I looked at on page 4, we have the comparison between phase one and phase two. And if you look at it, we're looking at, we had acreage is way down on phase two, yet we have a lot more units because we got these junior one-bedroom units, which still create a car in each one, no doubt there. And we look at the density is 48.3 units per acre on phase one, and it's on 76.29 units on phase two. When we look at the surface stalls that were provided, when there were only 167 units, and the surface stalls I look at more are like visitors, people coming in, they got to go somewhere. You don't want them on the streets. Yet on phase two, where you've got 240 apartment units, you only provide 30 units for parking for visitors. They got to go somewhere. So I think they've got a lot more units and they've jammed a lot more in it, but they provided less as parking and surface areas. I just think that phase two is just overloaded with units for what they want to do. And I agree it's a success, but I think that they pushed it beyond the issue they have to go.
Can we get an answer to Wally's first question of that? You spoke of that 62 stalls and 30 stalls. How does that fit into the chart that we're looking at? They would be additional.
Correct.
If that was to happen.
These are not constructed, so they're not counting towards either phase.
So potentially there's another 92.
Which would be good. Yes.
And then I guess, as long as Wally asked that question, would those, our question is, do we think if they were designated completely private, 92, they're still going to take the street spots when they want them? I think we have an advantage of having some of them open to the public of the two options that were provided.
If it comes true.
If it gets to that point.
We don't know that.
I'd like to ask the question of what do we have right now in phase one? How many people do we have and the number of cars per unit that you have? I know for a fact that you have 2 apartments that are 2-bedroom, that you have 3 people in it, and they have 3 cars for the 2 units. And I just would like to know the ratio what you have totaled right now for phase one and the number of cars that you have for phase one with those actual people that are there?
I'm glad you asked that question, and so I brought our leasing manager and our building manager, Paula Armato.
Hi.
Yes, there's definitely, in 2 bedrooms, there's definitely some scenarios where there's going to be 3 cars, and we provide 2 underground, and then the 3rd car parks in the surface lot, is how we've been doing that. So we're trying the best we can to monitor our surface lot, but there's definitely a bigger issue at hand where Bel Air employees or Pizza Man employees are parking in our lot, and it's pushing our own residents to be looking for parking in the town square. So we're battling kind of a bigger issue here as well.
You use parking permits by chance?
We do, but we're kind of having trouble, monitoring it, and I have to call them in personally to the police department, and people are blocking fire lanes. That's how desperate the
So
situation
are they
is getting.
visibly parking? So if I drive by there, I'll see something in a window that says,
Yeah, that's correct. But again, I'm personally walking the lots as much as I can. I'm calling them in for ticketing. It still doesn't solve the issue.
As a resident of the town square and not November Road, even though I tried, I can do an unscientific analysis every morning at 6 a.m. that you have 20 residents parking on the square. I mean, always. Usually more than 20. I see them get in their car, go to work every day, kind of thing. And they're the same cars. There's that red sports car that's always in the same spot. And they are kind of on the library corner. Right. That's where they are. And I don't know that, right. I know behind, because I'm in Forge, behind Forge is pretty empty at night. It's not full. So I'm thinking the Forge the Bel Air employees and stuff are back there. But you're right, maybe they're pushing them up. My point is I'm hoping with phase 2 that we can kind of eliminate some of that phase 1 problem too. Whether it be, numbered lots or whatever, numbered spaces, so that we solve those 20 plus cars, get them into a phase 2, scenario, however, and then start from scratch. Then at 6 a.m., the entire corner is packed with cars. So anybody going to the library at 8 o'clock, whatever time the library, those cars are.
They are for sure our residents. We definitely need that additional lot for overflow. I think a lot of people have guests, and there's always children that are visiting, and there's no way to really anticipate how many are going to be there. But I just do believe that the overall town square itself, with all the patrons going to get their nails done and to Bel Air and Pizza Man, are still, filling up when you do events. They're still using our lot during those peak hours when people are getting home from work. So, then they're parking wherever they can find it. They're circling, they park, then they go home and they're overnight, so it's a larger issue.
The food truck, I don't know who was here for the food trucks last time. They used your lot.
Right.
To park, and there had to be 300 cars in there.
Yes.
So where are those people going? Maybe you're right, the structure once it's open, but I'm not sure how that started, but people just lined it just like
it looked like it was an
festival.
Organized.
Right,
Yeah,
totally
it looked
organized,
organized.
right.
Yeah.
So there's just one problem. We put a big building there. We have to kind of think about it. But I only think that you got, overall, we just need to fix what the problems are in phase 1 with phase 2. You can't solve all the problems, but if we could eliminate the street parking from your residents and try to get them, solved in phase 2, then we'll eliminate, that overnight stuff.
Yeah, and I think first of all, let's look at the macro picture of this discussion. This is a great problem to have. We have people that want to be at Drexel Town Square, and this is a very unique and signature development that is admired from way beyond the city, the state. This is something that people want. A lot of other municipalities, they want to be Oak Creek. I hope you guys realize that. So these are things we have to work out. These are growing pains. I understand all these things. We're trying to help with that in any way we can. I think for tonight, my thought was we're looking at phase two. We're looking at phase two as a plan commission meeting. And I think we've addressed the answer to phase two within the parking we currently have. And I think we've been very thoughtful with the way that that's happening. I think the discussion of what is phase one and maybe, you know, what's happening there, it's probably a combination of a bunch of things. It's not one thing. And I think the best effort we can make is to talk and focus on what we're trying to work with you guys on in phase two. And I think that the methodology, and I'd like to defer to our CFO that I brought tonight for the main purpose of that methodology of what phase two has for its own parking proper, maybe, you know, something maybe you can describe and explain how we've come up with this thought.
Absolutely. Joel Eisen with Barrett Lowe. So what we did with our phase two is, as you notice, we have a number of junior one bedrooms. They're specifically sized to and priced to the point where, you know, our current one bedrooms tend to target couples who have two cars. It's a multi-vehicle household at that point. We transitioned to the junior one bedroom as a strategic move to try and resolve some of the parking issues we faced in phase one, where we anticipate those units specifically to have an average of 1 to 1.15 cars per unit. We increased our parking ratio from phase one to phase two by 1.15 to 1.36. We also believe that the addition of 242 units to the town square, while we have a tremendously successful project in phase one and it's 99% occupied, 100% occupied on any given month, the addition of 240 units by virtue of adding that supply will help maybe scale down the demand for phase one to maybe a 95% level, which is where we typically underwrite these projects to. If we're at 95% in phase one and we're at 95% in phase two, we believe we have more than enough parking between the two projects and what we have to offer currently. Phase two, looking at it in a bubble and its context, has more than enough parking to address our junior one bedrooms. Our two bedrooms have been scaled down a little bit as well. We have a number of smaller two bedrooms, which will, you know, tend to go towards maybe couples who want to use one of the bedrooms as an office, as opposed to, you know, having a family residence in there, which will steer more towards our larger two bedrooms and three bedroom units. We think that's going to address a number of the parking issues that we faced on phase one, and really we've added additional parking beyond that and put a higher ratio of parking into our phase two project to that 1.36 level.
I think one of the things to also think about is we wanted to phase one with dual income, no kids, one bedrooms. We had a lot, and I think everyone at this commission was worried about that. We now have a waiting list on that particular type of unit, but I think the idea of the junior one bedroom creates an affordable unit. This thing's going to be less than $1,000 a month where people kind of view what is a one bedroom, what does that mean? And I think it's going to, you know, create additional buzz within a new demographic and activate that demographic, which is more of a single person with a single car living in that spot in a brand new unit in Oak Creek that they've never seen before. I mean, that type of price point, that's why we're doing those 97 units. It's because, you know, the people that are in that demographic and that type of income level, they're gonna be crazed for this project. They're gonna be crazed for that unit because it gives you all of these amenities in this marketplace at this particular, you know, dynamic spot. It's a game changer. I feel very strongly that that's the main reason we did it. We didn't try to do this to help the parking problem. We tried to do it to create an affordable unit for this marketplace in a way that people can afford.
Before we go farther with the parking, I don't know if I should switch gears, but Mike, the fire turnaround, you want to do it now or you want to do it later? Do it a little later? Okay, before I forget though, I didn't want to make you sit here all night. Again, we do have a parking problem. Now we don't have a parking situation, and as Andrew said, until it's fully built out, we We won't realize where the need falls. Here's a question. What did we do last year? Do we have winter parking restrictions in Town Square like we do on city streets? We didn't enforce it. 'Cause that would become quite a problem also.
We understand, once we're built, the honeymoon's going to come to an end. We're going to have to enforce the parking restrictions that we do have out here. I think while there's this being built and that in the works and parking situations out there or remedies out there, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to be knocking these people off and ticketing and towing at this point.
I agree, and I think the long-term answer is to really take a look at what we call Phase 3, the triangular lot in the future, and to figure out how that puzzle piece helps. It helps take the pressure off Phase 1, whether all of it or a portion of it goes city. Right now, we're really looking at Phase 2 on the construction end. The 5 spots we're currently losing, and the current ratios they're proposing. So that's what we're looking at, but what I'm saying is we're going to have to address that Phase 3. And again, we may not arrive at the answers tonight here, but we have to take that into account because I think in the end, that's going to be the answer.
But we can't get to phase 3, until phase 2. I think to Andrew's point, they've put more spots and interesting explanations as to the juniors and the amount of cars, and I think it all, to me, makes some sense. I'm buying it for right now. So they've got 1.36. I know, while the surface versus garage stalls, I think more garage stalls at higher density helps our problem more so. So I'm okay. The fact that they've added more parking, they moved the overall project global problem down the road, get us closer to addressing phase 3. I think the library answer is somehow in this lot, however we word that, because
I agree.
You're not going to fix it out to the west.
Right. I mean, we can't shorten the walk. And if the walk's too long here with an ADD ramp, we must have a ramp on that side. We got to have them on every side. So, again, once you cross the street and you go to the ramp, it's probably the same distance. But
we can talk about this parking in phase 3, but that's really not what's here. I do think it's got to be clear that phase 3 parking, as we go to the next step, there's got to be some type of an answer to utilize that in a parking scheme of some sort.
I'm not so concerned about the residents. I'm concerned about the visitors that they have. You got that many apartments, you're going to have a lot of visitors. So my question is, where do they park? They're not going underground. They're going to have surface parking if you don't have enough. And I think Carrie, she's going now. I'm sorry. Sorry, Carrie. But one of the items here, it said that number 15, that the plans for the north parking lot designed for a minimum of 85 parking stalls are reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission, and that the lot is installed by the developer prior to the installation of footings. Now, is that the footings for phase 2, or what are they talking about? So it's something that's got to be resolved,
Yeah, if I may, that condition, we did talk about that at quite some length this afternoon internally. And given the fact that there is, certainly some challenges with the existing parking within the complex itself for a variety of reasons, and we've all talked about those. During the construction, with the reconfiguration of some of those parking areas, we're concerned about the displacement of those parking stalls, and that's why we wanted some solution, albeit it may be an interim one, in place before we brought in another, several hundred maybe construction workers, or displace those current residents from those stalls, given that the construction of the phase 2 was imminent.
I think construction of phase 2 is imminent, and I think more importantly, we also did acquire in June the property just south of the Emerald Preserve, which we may be able to use as a construction site, perhaps for construction workers. We understand the pressure that creates, but that seems, we were using our site the other night for Oak Creek for the Wednesday night event. Why can't we use that for construction down there? And if you guys would be so kind to grant us an ability so that those construction workers only go to that site, it seems to make sense to me.
Brian, anything?
I think we're hitting on the parking here. Excuse me, I'll turn that on. We're hitting on the parking here. The construction side of this is obviously where my concern comes in. And I believe the displacement of the residents that are there now in the phase one parking, we got to find a home for them. The residents that are parking around the square now, we need to find a home for them. And that's where this phase three parking comes into play. That would be very beneficial for solving some of the issues that we have at hand. If we can get that done prior to the construction of the phase two building. And I think we're in at least thinking about it. So that's heading in the right direction.
Anyone else? It can be, let's kind of stick to the parking for the time being, and then there's a couple other issues. Brian, we got to talk about the park path and the grade, what we do about that.
So Mayor,
That's
I'm
another one.
hearing, a little bit more comfort level with looking just at phase two as phase two. I'm hearing a little more comfort level.
No,
and our
it's
issue,
kind of like eating an elephant. You got to do it one bite at a time, so to speak. And I know we have this, but we do have to sort these problems out. And there's a lot of problems. There's some of it's caused by success. Some of it's caused by a little bit of management, and again, not being fully built out. So I think it's something we have to look at and figure out. And then there's, let's face it, there's a cost factor to this. There's a cost factor to you. There's a cost factor to us. And what's the price of that for what we're going to need? And in a sense, you're putting a price on something and you don't know if you're going to need it in the very end either. So that has to be kind of looked at also.
maybe where I was going with that was, really bifurcating the two issues, the two phases. I'm hearing that, phase two is there's an improvement with overall ratios and maybe sitting on its own merit satisfies the commission. But I'm also hearing then, okay, but we still have the issue with phase one. So I'm guessing that you're going to direct staff to continue on with those discussions.
I would say yes. Let's face it, with the density being what phase two is, it's not going to cure the ills of phase one. It's just not. We're going to have to do that by working together and spearheading a logical problem that addresses the overflow needs of one. And quite frankly, it's great if you go with national averages and go, let's rent out at 95%, but it's in their best interest and ours to be rented at 100%. Because empty units aren't generating money and they're not doing what we put them in for. So, we really have to, sit down and look at long-term solutions to this. Short of going deeper and putting in 2 floors of parking, which is really expensive underground, not going to do it. So, and there's complications going back a long way on why we ended up here, quite frankly.
But the construction component, the construction parking component, I think to your point, even if we look at 2 and something and get comfortable with that, knowing that 3's got to be an ongoing conversation to the global problem, but the immediate needs to Commissioner Johnson's is the construction, parking, and how you're going to resolve that. You've thrown out a couple of possibilities. How do we get comfortable with that? Because that really concerns. I'm comfortable with 2 in knowing where it's going, the improved density, but the construction of it is going to create a much bigger immediate problem.
And you're right, Pat. And I think Rick put out an option. I hadn't thought of that. It's their construction guys will park there if need be. It isolates them to one end. So it's possible to go there. Hard to say. It's what are you going to do with phase 3? But it's viable. You're going to have to stage material down there too. You're going to have trucks coming in. So that's the other thing. When we get to the planning stage of this construction, do we want them coming in off Forest Hill? Or do we want them coming down 6th Street? That may be a legitimate concern too. So, we're going to have concrete trucks and you name it, stuff crawling in here. So it's going to be busy. you know, and we're not done building here yet. But we have other things to build here too. So we've got to be kind of strategic about what we're doing here.
We'll have the waters, just to kind of put
Yes.
this into perspective for the next 18 to 24 months. We're going to have the waters, the project to the south, and this project all at once.
So we're not just going to have their construction workers. We're going to have multiple size developments going on to the tune of probably almost 500 units, right? What's the waters? I mean, you're going to have a lot of residential guys working here. So it's going to take a lot of coordination on everybody's part. So it's
Just a resident. I just think
I'm just a resident.
Not
You're
an
in it
elected
now,
official.
yeah.
I'm just saying that
Matt?
construction part with all that's got to be somehow resolved. How are you
Yeah.
going to handle it?
Oh, you know, acting as the master planning architect, you know, phase 3. I know that you want to sort of tie the old phase 3 triangle site to phase 2. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and I say that because the phase 3 site, we sort of arrived at the phase 1 problem because of what happened with enlarging the site for the medical office building, and that actually happened after the PUD and the master plan was approved and completed. So I just want to caution that you can't really tie those two sites together. It's going to be very difficult to do.
I always thought phase 3 would take the
Correct.
overflow from phase.
Correct. And if we put a parking lot on phase 3, the money that's been spent on that lot, you're not going to be able to see the cost basically paid back. So it's a really tricky situation. And in fact, the phase 1 parking, we actually had almost exact same ratio. We had a 1.4 ratio of parking on phase 1, but when that squeeze happened, because of the need for more land for the medical office, we actually lost about 45 stalls, which is the exact number to get us to the 1.4, which is pretty much where we're at on phase 2. So I can show you what the original master plan showed, and you'll see that there is a parking lot to the north on phase 1 that was originally planned. But because of the squeeze, basically we were told you got to get rid of that north parking lot in order to make phase 3 even viable for a building site or a building pad. So rather than just saying, it's a little you bit gotta tie trickier. Phase 2 to that triangle phase 3 site. So I just want to at least caution.
Okay.
It might not be
But
possible.
as Andrew said, it's probably imperative to kind of concentrate on this because we got a lot of work to do on phase 3. We know it's there, we know it's available, but we don't know what it looks like. You know, my original vision was actually a partial 2-story parking structure with a park on top of it. And it was really cool, but it was really expensive too. So I mean, we still have some work cut out for us.
Dan, did you have something for the fire department yet?
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I wrote it down because I know Mike wanted to address that, and I knew I'd start talking and I'd forget, because there are a couple of things we have to address, and really it's the park path jumps to mind and the fire department on the turnaround on the south side.
Mike Kresick, Fire Department. So I'll be somewhat brief on this. If I recall, there were 3 items that came into play, and they kind of all rolled together. First, it was the FDC location. The FDC supports the sprinkler system for the structure. It's not unusual for a project in this phase not to have that location decided yet. There's a variety of things that will occur to help select that location, water into the building, sprinkler room location, if there's a fire pump involved. All those things come into play. So it's just something I wanted to make sure that the discussion stayed active because it is a somewhat limited access site. There are some buildings out there where you have a lot of flexibility with the placement of the FDC. Certainly in an urban metro type structure like this, which is fantastic, we want to carefully kind of meter where that FDC actually goes. So it's more of a discussion point in the future for the placement of that FDC. Same thing with the hydrants. You know, you need a certain amount of hydrants to support the water supply for an event at the structure. We hope it never occurs, but we need to prepare for that. Because of the access challenges, the placement of those hydrants, we want to have hands-on with that to make sure they're efficiently placed. We don't want a hydrant every 50 feet. Certainly that's not viable, but we want to make sure that they're effectively and efficiently placed in the structure to meet our access needs and the economics of the situation there. I believe the last piece was that South Drive, a turnaround at the end of that drive. Basically, you have a one-way road. Once again, we hope we never place apparatus down there. More than likely, if we do, it's going to be an ambulance. But to have some sort of turnaround, so if that ambulance approaches and begins to drive to the west, they have a way to turn around. Relatively small item. That's something we can work out with the development team. I don't have a lot of concerns that we won't come up with a solution. As an example, we wanted to get access on the west side of phase 1. So that park path actually serves as emergency access for the fire department. So using that as the example, I don't have a lot of concerns that we won't be able to come up with an access, but once again, it's a point of discussion that we do address some sort of turnaround for fire apparatus on that South Drive.
Brian, do you want to talk about the shared path? Not the shared path, but
Just jump back to a couple of Mike's comments as well. Along with that, on that south parking lot, that far west stall, there's no way to back out of that stall without doing a 15-point turn, if you can get out of there at all. Unfortunately, we can't pull it up. One of the things that I've seen happening with phase 1 is cars backing out of the parking lot into the intersection onto 6th Street. And that's because it is packed. There's no place to turn around at the end. It's easier for them to just back out. That's not a good situation onto 6th Street, which is a major road for us. So we need to look at something we can do at that end to try and alleviate that problem with phase 2. Now, staying in that parking lot with the pathway, we have a pathway that is our main access into the park. And with this project, because it's going right up to the property line where the pathway is, this pathway is going to be reconstructed. So we have two questions. One, how can we maintain that path to maintain the access to our park throughout the construction, or minimize that impact and loss of use of that pathway during construction? And the second one is, we were kind of brainstorming about this a little bit today. Currently, that is a 10-foot wide path. The concern that we have is the slope on that path drains. It's pretty much a straight 2% grade coming across. Drains nice, works good. With the new proposed plan, it's warped pavement. There's flat spots in it to match in with the parking lot drainage that's needed to get that to function. And we're tossing around the idea of narrowing up that pathway to an 8-foot path. So then the parking lot would stay the same. We could still keep the 2% cross slope on that pathway and create some sort of a buffer area between the path and the parking lot.
anything else? What about that back slope on the existing lot? Carrie, you were kind of filling us in on that. On the slope? Or am I mistaken? Is it the existing lot going into the park entrance?
Not sure.
Where the proposed parking, where the underground proposal is
Oh,
in?
you're talking about the path on the north
Yes.
that's going to be
Do
changed
you wanna-
because of
You want to
the-
address that, please? Or does it
Okay.
need to be addressed?
It-
Or did I misunderstand you?
It's the easement needs to change because the location of the sidewalk is going slightly outside of the existing easement due to the proposed garage access. So it makes a 90-degree turn rather than going straight to the west side of for the path to the west side.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think what you're referring to, Mayor, is in phase one, on the west end of that parking lot on the south side of phase one, there was an area in there that was to be addressed in some future. We talked about some landscaping features or something being put in there. We never got together on where that was going to be or what to do with that, so we just planted grass there. So now at this time, I think we need to address that with fire too, as an access coming through there. We've got the sidewalk that goes through there. How do we landscape that? How do we maintain that current grass area to access the path as well?
And I think drawing upon that, I mean, this is a really good example of how working together we can come up with solutions to these things. And that's why we have the real high confidence that we'll be able to work through some of these things. The original proposal called for a orientation of that pathway, which would have resulted in a net loss of 2 or 3 parking spaces. We were able to work with the development team to reconfigure that so that we netted back 2 or 3 spaces and still maintain that access, that public access to Emerald Preserve, albeit at a little bit more circuitous route, but we believe that that was an appropriate, I don't hesitate to even call it a compromise, but it was a good design solution that accomplished all of our goals.
Will the second phase, do they allow pets? I just bring it up because you're talking about the parks and the pet walkways, sidewalks, and actually as we get closer to the winter season, it seemed more of a mess, if you will, on the sidewalks and things like of. So that's something we can talk about offline, but I think, again, as a partnership, we're trying to keep walkways clean for citizens that are walking through, and I don't know how you do it, but somehow we got to find a way to get there. So
But we did address a problem we were having in the parks with Emerald. You guys figured out a solution to help us to our problem, didn't you? Or am I mistaken? It's been better.
Awesome.
Work in progress there.
And that's good to hear because I get a lot of complaints about it, so it's good that we can report back to say that they are working on it.
The turnaround was going to be pavers, wasn't it, Matt?
Yeah, and we're actually showing
Exactly. So at the west end of the existing Phase 1 parking lot, the intent is to remove the grass and provide pavers. It was installed with a mountable curb to provide fire truck access. The slope is also a little less than 5% to make easy access to that fire lane. The intent would be the same with the south parking lot with Phase 2. Again, installing a mountable curb, relatively flat slope. If we could maybe pan down to the Phase 2 southern lot if possible.
Name and address.
Mike Frillick, Kapoor and Associates, 7711 Northport Washington Road, Glendale, Wisconsin. So the intent at the west end of the south lot is the same as the other lot to the north, provide a mountable curb. I know there's some concern that was expressed this evening regarding being able to get vehicles to turn around at the end there. Right now, where we're showing that landscaping and that last tree, we provided that because that area was currently shown as landscaping, basically just replacing it, enhancing it. However, what we could do is we could look at beefing up the pavement in that area to match the access that was provided to the north, so that it was capable of handling fire trucks as well as ambulances so they could turn around to that location. I know there's also some concerns expressed about the westernmost parking stall in the southern lot. That was one of those things where we were working through the placement of the islands. I think we do have the ability to slide the entire parking lot approximately 2 feet further to the east, so we could pick up a little space at the end of the lot to enhance the ability of that last vehicle to turn around. I believe the intent is also for that to be permitted parking. So the hope would be, residents would have a designated spot. So in doing so, we'd try to limit the number of vehicles that would come in there and be forced to back up or try to find a way to turn around. I know the fire department expressed some concerns, or just we need to discuss further the placement of hydrants. That's something we have the intent of doing. We don't know the FDC location yet, but with the southern lot, we will have a fire hydrant at the end of it and possibly another one intermediate. There's also some discussion regarding that southern path, maintaining access during construction. I guess it's more of a construction management issue, but I would foresee, since it is the main path, we'd look at constructing it maybe one half at a time, since it is right now 10 feet 10 feet wide, look at, cutting half of it out, getting the curb and gutter installed for the new parking lot, and then paving that portion, and then opening that up to residents, and then paving the southern half. The path right now on the south from the 6th Avenue or 6th Street as you head to the west into approximately that island right above the project limits word. Right now the path is designed so it all pitches towards the pond. As you head a little bit further to the west, it actually rotates and starts to pitch to the north into the wetland area to the west. So we're trying to emulate that, but the path right now is basically tabletop flat from one end to the other. So in order to get pitch on our curb and gutter so we can drain that lot appropriately, we'll work with the engineering department so we can find a solution that's amicable to both parties. I guess one other issue that hadn't been discussed in the group yet, but that was listed in the comments, was related to the storm sewer for that southern lot, and trying to tap that into the existing storm sewer that was provided out in 6th Street. Unfortunately, the stubs that were provided in 6th Street for storm sewer are located basically mid-block. There's two 15-inch storm sewers that were stubbed out. So they will serve the building adequately for the roof drainage. However, the closest storm sewer to the southern lot is located right where that crosswalk is shown at the southeastern corner of the building. There's an existing storm catch basin there. However, the pipe from that storm catch basin to the trunk line in 6th Street is only sized for that catch basin. It's not sized to handle the additional water from our parking lot. In addition to that, the storm sewer is also too high for us to actually be able to drain to it. So during one of our meetings with staff, they had indicated that it'd be preferred if we moved our discharge that's going directly into the pond further to the east, because the outlet pipe is further to the west. So just prevent some short-circuiting issues with the storm sewer. So I think that I'm just trying to touch on everything that was brought up during the discussions. I guess any further questions related to landscaping or civil design or utilities and things of that nature?
Commission, anything? Brian?
On the fire access path, during construction, I'm assuming that path is going to be obviously needed for the construction of the building. There's the landscape median that runs down through there. Are you looking at some sort of fence or something along there to keep part of that path open? Is that an issue for the fire department at all,
Well,
path-wise?
Again, I guess I'd really have to lean on the construction manager, whoever's hired. But what I would foresee is a construction fence being installed along that path, probably maybe a couple feet in from the eastern edge of that path, basically keeping it open for residents to use, keeping it open so a fire truck could still access that path, but then allowing the construction activity. I mean, there's only a few spots that really pinch tight on that path, mostly corners of the building. So I don't think it'd be a full impact. I think we'd just work around those specific areas.
Great question, Brian. The expectation is that that path does remain accessible to the fire department. But the fire department will work closely with the general to make sure that, if there is a temporary shutdown for some reason, at least we're aware of it. I believe it's Altius, and we have a generally very good working relationship with them. They had some understandings for our needs with access during construction for phase 1, so we anticipate that'll carry over. But the expectation is that it remains open, but notification for short-term closures as necessary.
Jocelyn?
Yes, I have a couple questions. Okay, so for the colors of the building, are they the exact same as phase 1, or what are the differences? Because I know the number of units are tight.
Sure. It's got its own character, but the main color, which is the white cement board panels, are pretty much exactly the same same color. We are using a different wood grain and a wood color.
Do you
So
have pictures?
we have actual samples.
Okay.
This is a sample of the panel that's very similar to what was used on phase one. I can pass these around if you'd like. There's some metal trim on the building which will have the same similar color to match that white. At the base of the building, we've got a darker color, very similar to the phase one again. But the wood color that we're looking at is actually quite a bit lighter than what we used on the base of phase one. So where we had the wood on just the ground level, we're actually looking at a wood panel system that would actually, we're actually using quite a bit more of that on phase two, which we thought worked out really nicely on phase one.
And there was some note, item number 6, that you have to relocate the existing fiber infrastructure for the garage. Can you provide more information on why this change or what this is in regards to?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So where the entrance to the garage is located, it's at the very western edge of the phase one lot to the north. Reason being is grade drops off, so then we don't need as long of a ramp to get down into the underground parking. However, there's an existing fiber line that runs along the north side of the phase one building, or I'm sorry, the south side of the phase one building. So as we create that ramp to go into the underground parking for phase two, we're going to need to lower that fiber a little bit more. Because we need to lower the grade additional 2 feet along the north face of the phase two building. So we'll just have to bury that fiber a little bit deeper to get underneath that ramp.
Okay. And also, we saw the glass railings, the transition from the metal. Can you give a little more information on the change?
On the glass railing system. So very similar to what we used on phase one, the railing system that we have there is all glass. I believe the railing system that we had originally talked about doing a metal railing system was actually on the west side of those open courtyards. But I think we're going to end up using the same glass railing system that we're using on the balconies instead, or something very similar.
And another question about parking. So can you all provide your feedback about these additional 85 or was it 92 parking spaces? I know we have 85 on item 15. Can you provide us a little more information about that area?
In particular, the design of that.
Well, its availability for parking, when or if this is possible for the phase two section of this project.
Is this on? The 85 spots in item number 15 was the previous discussion we just had on how we wanted to alleviate some of the concerns for phase one. What I took away from that discussion was, yes, staff continue on those discussions, but we are going to look tonight at the phase two ratios, the phase two on its own merits, while that discussion is going on, and not try to tie the two together.
Okay.
If that's
but the
fair.
team is open, you're open to those discussions about,
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay.
We've had those discussions previously. We'll continue those.
okay. Excellent.
Gary, does
And then
item
what-
15?
So 15 we'd eliminate
Do
from
we
the,
eliminate item 15 or not?
do we have to mention that at all?
15 and 17, for the time being.
I mean,
tie
we
in-
shared our concerns going forward, but I don't think we can
Add to
put
this
that
one.
into this. We'd
We're only
eliminate
talking
15 and
phase
17.
two, yeah.
Item, let's just touch on the 5 spots that are going away in front of the library. We talked about redoing those. Does that have to be in this, or is that in the developer agreement later
You're not talking about the 4 you mentioned, you're talking about the 5 they're going to replace out on the
on?
other
The
side.
5, yeah, I'm going back to the 5 in the front that we're going to lose, and we talked about relocating them farther down 6th Street.
I think that certainly it bears or warrants a mention
Right.
in this staff report, and specifically the minutes. a development agreement will be required, and that is a bit outside the bounds of what the Plan Commission typically does. As long as we are all crystal clear and memorialized in the record that it is the expectation that those would be replaced in kind elsewhere along that public right of way, yeah, we'll just catch that in the development agreement.
Catch in the development agreement, right? Andrew?
So, just to be clear, we will not do number 15. We'll continue those discussions. 16 we just spoke of with the making sure we net back the 5 that we'll be losing in front of this building, in their building. But number 17 I think bears a little bit of discussion, and just as I know you're not privy to the 3 conditions that we wanted to bring up for consideration. Number 17 is, this is phase 2 now, of course. All surface parking stalls shall be numbered and assigned to lessees. A minimum of 1 parking stall shall be assigned to each apartment unit. So that's a
Can we
management.
dictate that to them? No?
Yeah, that's a management
That was
tactic, but we wanted to.
And that was underground and above ground.
All surface.
Or
is
all,
what-
oh,
It says all surface parking
I
stalls,
stand corrected.
Right.
Okay.
but we want to stay with 17 then.
Can't do it.
Yeah, I don't see why.
Can't tell them how to operate their business. They know how to do it. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
We certainly can't manage it going forward, so, I mean, if we did
You can put it in, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we really don't have any authority to, tell them how to.
In lieu of a much better comfort, in lieu of a much more comfortable parking ratio, we thought, let's throw that idea out there to see how we could put in the record how we expect the stalls to be assigned for the lessees.
And to be clear, that was trying to alleviate the problem as well. I wonder if I know that I've got a parking spot, but I don't have a spot. So I wonder if there's parking there, so I'm going to go in there and look, and
I could come in and
there's
look,
no
right.
parking here. So I think initially on the front end, and if you were at least to number the spots, you say, well, I've been assigned spot 5, and so I've got a reasonable expectation that spot 5 is going to be open. Second advantage of doing that and numbering the spots is you as a patron at Bel Air or at anything are less likely, oh my gosh, there's a number in that spot, and maybe I'm not supposed to be here.
What's their, I mean, I get why we would want to do it, and I think for all those reasons, it makes some sense. What's your position on it?
We're absolutely open to it for what it's worth. We're actually looking at doing that for our phase 1 lot currently.
Great answer. 17's in.
So and to kind of round this out, what we need to be leery of as a city, and I know that they're thinking about it, they need to assign a parking spot on site to their lessees. So you can park underground for X, you can park on the surface for Y. We don't want the lessee, the resident, to say, nah, I'm going to save the X amount of dollars, and I know that the city doesn't enforce. We'll just find a lot. We'll park on the street, which is what you see in downtown Milwaukee. Yep. I mean, I'll walk 2 blocks so I can avoid a cost. We're at the point now where we can't give them the third option of park wherever else you want. We're kind of there, and I think this, along with other management solutions that they're far better at achieving and vetting, might be helpful in that regard.
So by numbering it, they're forced, each apartment's got to have one or the other, and it works for everybody.
Or are we going to keep 17 in there knowing they want to do it?
17's in.
Okay.
I have a question about
go
the
ahead,
5
Chaucer.
spaces lost. So, do you have a backup plan versus getting rid of the 5 spaces? Is there an alternative?
You want to explain that one, or I can?
We did have lengthy and very specific discussions to the loss of the 5 spots, and we already expressed Sharon and the library board's concerns to the development group, and we kind of arrived at it's not ideal that we're losing those spots, but if you look at the aesthetic elements that comes along with it to the project, that's a positive to the city and to the residents as well. And as long as we netted back 5, we grew less concerned about the absolute proximity or geography to the door of the library, knowing that those aren't reserved for library patrons anyway. And that combined with this solution, I think makes the city staff comfortable with allowing, I guess, the removal of those spots on 6th.
Fred?
I still have the question about construction parking during phase 2. I didn't hear a definite answer on how that's going to be handled.
Can't really give you one. So it's kind of part of it, but I think that's a further discussion about maximizing, don't confuse what we've been calling phase 3 there, but potentially the south side of the preserve. Am I correct in that assumption? Hey, yeah, and kudos to you. I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, it's totally accessible, and quite frankly, we're gonna need it, and also staging at times.
Do we need to put that in the
Other condition?
some comment? I don't say you have to specify it specifically, but at least something about you have to control.
Harry,
I'll
what do
tell
you
you,
think?
I saw a problem when we had the first phase of the trucks parking and all that right on the square, and you had a hard time coming through 6th Street because you had trucks and cars double parked. Construction vehicles were weaving in and out on 6th Street, and you had a major problem for the first phase. I can see a problem happening in phase 2, especially in front of the library. So that's why I'm bringing that construction parking, or at least some comment about some alternate plan that we may have. Otherwise, I see some problems with the traffic on 6th Street during that development of phase 2.
No, it's a legit concern, Fred, but I mean, unfortunately, when you're doing construction, you're gonna have some disruption. That's the price of progress. But I do think that's an option down there. Carrie, do you think it needs to be in here? Or is that
I think that's
something-
more of a coordination issue between the engineering department, the construction GC, and the inspection department.
And quite frankly, I mean, the city and Andrew hit it on the head. I mean, the days of, parking your construction truck around the town square and for 8 hours, that's not going to happen. We're going to start ticketing. We will.
What about bringing the waters and the other development that's going to be constructing at the same time? How do we get them involved in this
I mean,
offsite?
each site is obviously a little bit unique, and we'll be looking for them to have similar arrangements for laydown and construction parking for their employees. And we can't obviously have this discussion with Emerald Grove Phase 2 and ignore that with the other developments. I think it's going to be a little easier to develop those partnerships maybe with Woodman's or some vacant parking areas that are in the vicinity. Obviously, it's going to require a little bit of, again, a coordination with adjoining property owners, but we're committed to working with all the parties to achieve a parking solution in that interim that's going to work for everybody.
And again, construction parking happens all over. It's happening downtown right now. They're pinched for it. Down at the arena, they were at Northwestern. It's nothing new. They did add paid lots, but the density was so thick down there, they still had issues down there. So, as Doug said, that's probably the least of our problems to work through, to tell you the truth. Brian, go ahead.
I just want to point out too that, Fred, your concerns are legitimate, and we're going to have those same issues that we have with phase 1. The whole time they're putting up the siding on the buildings, they're working on the decks, they're going to be in the travel lanes and the parking stalls on 6th Street. Lanes are going to be closed down for that work. When they're doing the work to put in the driveways off 6th Street, lanes are going to be closed down. So we're going to have the construction issues, one-lane traffic, people getting through here. No matter what we do with this development, we're going to have those issues.
What we really need to do is coordinate that we're not shutting down the east and the west side at the same time, that we do leave a path between Forest Hill and Drexel some way.
Yeah, I think the thing, to think about here is we'd love everyone, even if we mandated they come through Forest Hill, which would make a lot of sense, and they parked on that lot. Not all the guys are going to do that. So we can't make empty promises to you to say that these contractors are going to obey our mandate. They simply won't.
You just have to provide something, hope it takes some of the flow off.
Right.
John?
When do you estimate it opening?
We're showing a 24-month build, and we'd like to start in February.
I want to ask, see, Carrie, based on all the discussions that we've had, do you feel comfortable with the, that would be 16 conditions that you've put here? Or do you see any changes that should occur? I'm trying to close this off a little bit.
Thank you.
That's where I was going.
Unless there's an objection to number 16, or number 17, I don't think that there's any other revisions that are necessary at this point.
Well, I changed that to number, because we eliminated 50, I made that number 16, but if there's no objection to leaving it in, it should be okay.
Okay, so I heard from the commission that what I have labeled as number 17, which would become number 16, would remain in. And I wasn't clear as to whether or not condition as labeled 16 is something that we should leave in as a condition or just leave as part of the development agreement requirements.
I thought we said
thought
that
it was development.
Yeah, you're going to work it out.
Is
We've made it clear
is
that it's
that
going to be
staff's
traded out.
recommendation? Leave it in the development agreement or put it in a condition?
Which one, relocation of the 5?
Development? Don't matter. Don't matter.
All right, so we can eliminate what is labeled as number 16, therefore you will have 16 conditions. Sorry, 15 conditions.
Correct. 17 becomes 15.
Correct.
15 and 16 out. Ready to roll? I got 16
All right.
in flight. I want to get out.
All right, let's go.
We have to read all of this?
Yeah.
Krell moves that. Krell moves the commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Richard Barrett, Barrett Low Visionary Development for Emerald Row Phase 1 on the property located at 8001 South 6th Street with the following conditions. 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that a revised easement for the north public sidewalk is provided to the engineering department and the Department of Community Development prior to submission of building permit applications. 3, that the redesign of the south public pedestrian path on city property be coordinated with the engineering department with a final design to be approved prior to the issuance of building permits. 4, that a plan for ensuring uninterrupted public access to Emerald Preserve and the public path on the west is coordinated with and approved by the city prior to submission of building permit applications. 5, that plans for the landscape area in the northwest portion of the north parking lot and public access to Emerald Preserve are coordinated with and approved by the city prior to the submission of building permit applications. 6, that plans for the relocation of the existing fiber infrastructure at the garage access are coordinated with and approved by the city prior to submission of building permit applications. 7, that all fire department requirements regarding hydrant and FDC placement as well as a turnaround for the south parking lot are met. 8, all plans addressing grading, drainage, and stormwater quality, including the use of stormwater best management practices, shall be approved by the city engineer prior to the issuance of permits. 9, that final photometric and lighting plans indicating the approved luminaire type, cyclone, pole type, color, and height for Drexeltown Square are submitted for final approval by the Director of Community Development upon written recommendation of the electrical inspector prior to the issuance of permits. 10, that all mechanical equipment, ground, building, and rooftop, and utility boxes, transformers are screened from the view. 11, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility. 12, that all required development agreements are coordinated with the engineering department. 13, that a shoring plan for development along 6th Street is submitted for review and approval by the engineering department prior to the issuance of permits. 14, that all revised plans, site building, landscaping, etc. are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. And 15, all surface parking stalls shall be numbered and assigned to lessees. A minimum of 1 parking stall shall be assigned to each apartment unit.
Hickman seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Clark, aye. Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski.
Correll, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Okay, last on the agenda, adjournment.
Grillo moves to adjourn at 9:42.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Roll aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Great. I'd like to thank our entire staff. This was a rather large agenda. Some complicated issues and some not too fun issues with the cell tower, but you did a tremendous job pulling this all together for us. Thank the IT guy. He always does a great job for us. And please get out there. We're having our first ever beer garden at Avonshine Park Thursday through Sunday. I believe it kicks off at 4 o'clock Thursday. So please get out there, discover, and celebrate Oak Creek. Oh, Rick?
And I just wanted to take a minute to just say how we appreciate all the hard work, and we understand that sometimes the job that you guys do here is probably less appreciated, but I want you to know from my whole team and where we come from, we really appreciate the hard work. So thank you.
Thank you. And again, thanks to the commissioners. I've been assured the next agenda won't be quite as long. Good night.